The ending of Game of Thrones was a disaster of unreal proportions. Game of Thrones went from being probably the most popular TV show of all time into a disgrace counted among the worst series finales of all time, if not the worst. The terrible ending of the TV show and the lazy writing of Season 8 more broadly inspired countless articles, video essays, reviews, arguments at the dinner tables, and a petition to remake it with competent writers that saw almost 2 million signatures. This is like if the entire population of Latvia signed it. Yet that is the past. Everyone but members of our folk have since moved on towards other shows, forgetting about their own favorite show falling from grace. Game of Thrones ending is now something people bring up, mostly in the context of other bad endings, or as a trivia, and the only people still interested in it are the fans of the original books and how that ending might fit into their ending. Thus, your first reaction upon seeing the title is probably something like, it's 2024 and you made a video about Game of Thrones. Well, yes. While I agree about a lot of points about the ending of the show, there is one particular talking point related to it that never sat right with me, to the point that I had the same argument with myself in the shower for years now. I speak of course of the final, expectation-subverting twist of Daenerys Targaryen, in the second to last episode, succumbing to madness and burning a city after it already surrendered, making her the final villain of the series, ahead of literal existential threat. It was that turn that made people hate the ending, but usually with an asterisk. Even some of the most ardent haters of the ending believe that what Dany did in Season 8 Episode 5 The Bells was of course a very stupid plot development, but not a completely baseless one either, that there was set up for Daenerys turning into a Mad Queen, only it was rushed and should take more time. Some even insinuated that those who hated Dany turning into a Mad Queen were simply not paying attention, that this twist was completely in character, and moreover was years in the making, set up as early as Season 1, and that only fools did not see what was coming. They believe that some of Dany's actions were supposed to give away that she is not sane and that she's more cruel and ruthless than other characters. That is collectively referred to as foreshadowing or setups or hints. The word foreshadowing especially often appears when both book Dany and show Dany are discussed. But one big problem about this line of thought is that there was no foreshadowing. Before we start, remember that if you like my content, like, subscribe and share so that more people can see it. Make sure to click the notification button so that you never miss a new video. We will start with a very quick refresher on Dany's show storyline for those who haven't rewatched the show in a while or never seen it. You can skip this part if you want. Daenerys Targaryen is an exiled princess of the overthrown Targaryen dynasty. Her brother Viserys sells her to a Dothraki warlord in exchange for an army, saying that he would be willing to give her to be raped by 40,000 men and their horses if it meant reclaiming the throne. At the wedding, she receives 3 petrified dragon eggs. On her wedding night, her husband rapes her. Life in the nomadic Kalasar turns out to be very difficult for her, and her husband does not help her acclimate since he rapes her every night. But she takes solace in her dragon eggs. Daenerys asks one of her handmaids, Doria, to teach her how to use pillow tricks to make Drogo respect her more, and it seems to work. As the Kalasar travels, Dany commands it to stop when she wants to contemplate the scenery alone. Viserys is enraged by what he sees as his sister commanding him and physically attacks her. One of the Dothraki defends her and asks if he should be punished physically, but Dany declines. Viserys, however, has his horse taken away, which is seen as a great shame. Daenerys discovers that she is pregnant, and she and Drogo seem to have found love with one another. Viserys is allowed to ride again, and Dany wants to reconcile with him by having Dothraki clothes sewn for him and inviting him for supper. Viserys is angry at this and beats her, but Dany fights back and threatens Viserys that if he ever beats her again, she will have his hands removed. While Dany befriends Jorah Mormont, a Westerosi exiled knight, she does not know that he spies on her. Daenerys is supposed to take part in a ceremony where she eats the stallion's heart to give strength to her son. The Doshkalin Spiritual Dothraki leaders proclaim that Dany's son will be the stallion who mans the world, a hero of an ancient prophecy that will unite the Dothraki into a single Khalasar and conquer all of the world. Viserys arrives drunk at the ceremony and draws a sword, which is forbidden. He threatens Dany's unborn child, trying to intimidate Drogo into sailing to Westeros. Drogo instead pours molten gold over Viserys' head, as Dany watches with a blank expression, saying that Viserys was not a dragon because fire cannot kill a dragon. With Viserys dead, Daenerys tries to convince Drogo to invade, but Drogo refuses to sail, since the Dothraki consider salt water to be cursed. A Westerosi wine seller attempts to poison Dany on the orders of the current Westerosi king, but she is saved by Jorah, who realizes what might be going on since he is a spy. Enraged at the assassination attempt on his wife and son, Drogo decides to conquer Westeros. Since Dothraki raise funds by exchanging slaves, Drogo arrives a Lazarin village to acquire them. Daenerys hates the way Dothraki treat their prisoners, especially the women, and she extends her protection over them. When one of the Dothraki objects to being refused to claim the women, Drogo and he fight and he sustains a minor injury. One of the women that Dany saved, Mirri Maz Duur, offers to tend to the wound. However, Drogo's injury becomes worse and he falls off his horse, a dire sign of weakness, since Dothraki follow only strength. Mirri judges that Drogo will die, but Dany asks if she knows magic that could save him, and Mirri affirms, starting a blood magic ritual, saying that nobody can enter the tent. The Dothraki want to intervene, but Jorah stops them from interrupting the ritual. Dany goes into labor and Rakaro says that only Mirri can deliver the baby. As such, Jorah walks into the tent. All of Drogo's Khalasar but a few people disperse. Mirri says that Dany's child was a deformed stillborn. Drogo lives but is vegetative. It turns out that the life of Dany's child was used to revive him. Mirri admits that she did it all for revenge for her village. Dany is forced to euthanize Drogo. She constructs a funeral pyre for him, places the dragon eggs there, and ties Mirri to the pyre as well. She then walks into the pyre, but as morning arrives, she turns out to be unharmed, with 3 baby dragons by her side, and the remaining Dothraki proclaim her as their leader. Dany leads the Khalasar across the Red Waste. She sends her 3 Blood Riders to scout the area, and one of them returns with an invitation from the great city of Karth. They go there, but the ruling council, the 13, refuse to let her in. Only one of the traders vouches for them, and they are allowed inside, and only after Dany threatens that, if they're not allowed to enter, she will return to destroy the place, once her dragons are grown. Dany teaches her dragons to breathe fire on command, Dracarys. Pyat Pree, a warlock, invites Dany to the House of the Undying. Xaro shows Dany a vault that is supposed to be full of treasures, and offers to give it to her in exchange for marrying him. All of a sudden, half of Dany's men are murdered. It turns out that Doria has taken her dragons to the House of the Undying, and Dany has to go there to retrieve them. In the House of the Undying, she sees several visions. Snowy, ruined throne room, the wall, and her dead husband and child. She then finds her dragons and is imprisoned by Pyat Pree, but after she commands the dragons with the word Dracarys, Pyat Pree is killed and they are freed. Xaro and Doria betrayed Dany and were behind the stealing of dragons. It turns out that Xaro's vault was empty. Dany closes Doria and Xaro in the vault and leaves Karth. Daenerys sails to Astapor to purchase the army of Unsullied, eunuch soldiers. Their owner, Crassus Monaclos, explains the inhuman way the soldiers are created, frequently insulting Dany in the process, believing that she does not know Valyrian. Missandei, his translator, diplomatically translates all of it. When Dany and Jorah walk around Astapor, Dany is attacked and almost assassinated, but she is then saved by Barristan Selmy, who, having been exiled by his Westerosi king, decided to join her. The next day, Dany walks around the Plaza of Punishment, where disobedient slaves are flayed and crucified as a lesson to other slaves. Dany offers water to one of the dying men. Jorah tells her that if she wants to retake Westeros, she will have to stain her hands with blood, to which she replies that it will be the blood of her enemies, not innocents. Dany wants to buy all 8,000 Unsullied, including those who are still in training, in exchange for a dragon. Selmy and Mormont object to this. Dany takes Missandei with her, and when they leave, Dany warns Jorah and Barristan to never question her in public. The next day, Dany arrives to exchange a dragon for an army. Drogon, however, disobeys Krazness. Daenerys tests whether the Unsullied really obey her, commanding them in Valyrian. When the slaver complains of the dragon disobeying him, she responds, also in Valyrian, a dragon is not a slave, and orders the Unsullied to kill the slave masters and free the slaves, but to harm no children. She then orders Drogon to burn Krazness. Astapor is sacked, and Dany offers the Unsullied that they can leave if they want, or serve her as free men. The Unsullied start to repeatedly hit their spears against the ground in appreciation of Dany, and all follow her. They march from Astapor to its sister city, Yunkai. The Unsullied choose a new commander, Grey Worm, who was given a derogatory name per the Unsullied custom. Dany wants the Unsullied to return to their own names, but Grey Worm says that his name is Lucky, because he had it when she set him free. While Jorah wants Dany to leave Yunkai and go to Westeros, she insists on freeing slaves. Yunkai sends an envoy, Razdal Moeras, to negotiate with Dany. He offers gold in exchange for Dany leaving the city alone. Dany instead orders Yunkai to release all their slaves and redistribute their wealth among them. Razdal says that she is mad and that they will defeat Dany and maybe even enslave her. Dragons react with anger to Razdal's words, and he is forced to leave the chest of gold for her anyway. It turns out that Yunkai employed a mercenary company, Second Sons. Dany meets with their 3 captains, Mero, Prendal Naghezn, and Daario Naharis. Prendal and Mero are disinterested in alliances. At night, Daario arrives and gives Dany the heads of Mero and Prendal, pledging Second Sons to her cause. During the War Council, Daario devises a plan to attack Yunkai and flirts with Dany. Within a few hours, Yunkai is captured. As all the slaves are released from the city, Daenerys tells them that they can only seize their freedom themselves. They respond by calling her Misa, which means mother. Daenerys joins them and they lift her up. Dany's dragons grow more and more unruly. Her forces march towards the 3rd slave city, Meereen. Daario continues romantic advances towards her. As they march towards Meereen, they witness a crucified slave child with a hand pointing towards Meereen. In total, 163 children were crucified. In front of the gates of Meereen, the city sends its champion to challenge Dany. Daario offers to take him in combat and easily wins. Dany speaks to the slaves that they might be free soon if only they seize the opportunity. Her forces catapult chests into the city, full of broken chains. Grey Worm sneaks into Meereen and a slave revolt starts, with the slaves opening the gates. Dany then decides to crucify 163 masters the same way they did to their children, and does not accept Barristan's suggestion to show mercy. News arrives that Yunkai re-established slavery and wants to attack Dany. She also learns that the council she left to rule Astapor was overthrown by a butcher. Dany says that if she can't rule a single city, she cannot hope to rule Westeros. As such, she decides to stay and rule Meereen until the situation in Slaver's Bay stabilizes itself enough. Hisdar Zolorak, one of the masters of Meereen, wants to bury his crucified father and says that he was opposed to the crucifixion. Dany allows it and begins a sexual relationship with Daario. Dany intends to send the Second Sons to kill the masters of Yunkai, but Jorah argues that she shouldn't do it, and she changes her mind, instead instructing to send Second Sons with Hisdar to try and negotiate, saying that the masters can live in her new world or die in their old one. Ser Barristan tells Dany that Jorah has been spying on her. Dany realizes that it was Jorah's spying that almost had her poisoned in Vaes Dothrak. She spares his life, but exiles him, forbidding him from staying in the city. It turns out that some of the newly freed slaves want to sell themselves back to slavery. A man arrives with a bundle of burnt bones in his arms, saying that his 3-year-old daughter was burned alive by Drogon. While Drogon left and was not found, Daenerys decides to personally chain Rhaegal and Viserion in the Meereenese catacombs. She then leaves, crying at the sound of their distraught. An unsullied soldier is killed by a resistance group, Sons of the Harpy. Hisdar returns from Yunkai, saying that the masters are willing to share a rule with former slaves, but they want the fighting pits to reopen, to which Dany refuses. When Dany visits imprisoned Rhaegal and Viserion, they try to attack her. A son of the Harpy is captured, and while Barristan wants him to be put on trial, one of the Meereenese freedmen, Mosador, wants the man to be killed. Privately, Barristan tells Dany that her father really was a mad king, revealing Aerys' atrocities to her. Daenerys assures him that she is not like him, and Barristan agrees, but warns Dany that Aerys also believed he was executing justice. Thus, Dany decides to put the man on trial. Mosador, however, ignores Dany's order and kills the man, angering Dany. Mosador is sentenced to death. On the day of his execution, riots break out in Meereen. At night, Drogon suddenly reappears, but he flies away just as quickly. Hisdar once more pleads to reopen the fighting pits in Meereen, and Dany still refuses it. She then learns that Barristan Selmy was killed by the Sons of the Harpy, and that Grey Worm was heavily injured. Enraged, Dany brings 8 nobles to the catacombs with Viserion and Rhaegal. One of them is burnt alive, and the other is torn apart. Dany then approaches Hisdar and says she will agree to opening the fighting pits, and says she will marry Hisdar to appease the Myrines. Dany and Hisdar watch the spectacle of the fighting pits, and suddenly Jorah Mormont and Tyrion Lannister reveal themselves to them. She exhausts Jorah again, sparing his life on Tyrion's suggestion. Tyrion and Dany talk, and he advises her to leave Westeros to its ways, to which she says that she will stay in Meereen only long enough to stabilize the situation, and that once she makes it to Westeros, she will not stop the wheel, meaning the cycle of Game of Thrones played by the nobles, but break it. She then takes Tyrion as her advisor. The Great Games in Meereen start. Jorah is one of the participants, and he overpowers everyone else. Suddenly he throws a spear towards Daenerys, but it was actually for the son of the Harpy who wanted to attack her. Sons of the Harpy reveal themselves and begin a carnage on the freedmen and the collaborating masters, including Hisdar. Dany and her team are cornered in the middle of the pit, but all of a sudden, Drogon appears. He starts a carnage, and Dany jumps on his back and flies away. She is stranded away from Meereen, when all of a sudden, she is surrounded by a Khalasar. Dany is taken prisoner and reveals her identity to Khal Moro, who decides to escort her to the temple of Dosh Khalin, as is customary for widowed Khaleesi's. Because Dany violated the law, the Khals decide whether she will be allowed to join the Dosh Khalin. Jorah and Daario manage to track Dany, and she shares with them her plan on how to free herself from the Dosh Khalin. When the Khals are about to decide Dany's fate, she taunts them by saying that she is the only one who could lead the Dothraki. The men laugh, and Moro says that for her arrogance, Dany will be raped by them, their blood riders, and their horses. In response, Dany throws the braziers on the ground, which sets the entire place on fire and kills the Khals. Daenerys emerges from the temple unharmed, and all the Dothraki bow in front of her. Dany learns that Jorah has a grayscale, and she commands him to find a cure. When the Dothraki riders follow Dany to Meereen, Drogon returns and she speaks to them, declaring all of them her blood riders, as opposed to just choosing 3. When Dany returns, Meereen is besieged. She wants to destroy their forces and destroy the cities of the Masters, but Tyrion begs her to consider diplomacy to not become like her father. Peace talks are indeed held, where the slavers demand that Missandei and the Unsullied will be sold into slavery again, and that the dragons will be killed. Dany rejects those terms and Drogon arrives. Rhaegal and Viserion break free from their catacombs, and the 3 dragons burn the besieging ships. The Khalasar, in turn, kills the remaining sons of the Harpy. Yara and Theon Greyjoy arrive at Meereen, offering to pledge themselves to Dany's cause if she allows the Iron Island to remain independent. Dany agrees under condition that the Ironborn will no longer raid and rape, noting that both her and Yara's fathers were evil, but that they will not repeat that mistake. Dany orders Daario to stay in Meereen and ends their relationship, saying that she will probably have to marry someone once in Westeros. She also renames Slaver's Bay as Bay of Dragons. Dany names Tyrion as her hand. All of her forces sail to Westeros. Daenerys arrives on Dragonstone, her birthplace, and confronts Varys about his dubious loyalties, noting that he was complicit in an assassination attempt on her back in Season 1. He assures her that his allegiance is to the common people, and that Dany is someone he deemed worth following. Dany threatens that if Varys' loyalty shifts ever again, she will burn him alive. Melisandre arrives at Dragonstone and reveals to Dany the prophecy about the prince that was promised, with Missandei explaining that Valyrian uses a gender-neutral word for prince. Dany learns that the North has a king, Jon Snow, and she requests Tyrion invites him to Dragonstone. Dany and Tyrion create initial battle plans, with Tyrion stressing concern for civilians, while Olenna Tyrell tells Dany that she should be a dragon and not a sheep. Jon and Dany meet, but they do not really get along, with Jon bringing up the crimes Aerys committed on Jon's family. Dany apologizes for this, and asks to not be judged by her father's sins. Jon reveals that he's not there to swear fealties, but to ask Dany's help for the fight against the White Walkers. Dany is annoyed by this and explains to Jon that she believes that ruling Westeros is her destiny, and that she is who she is because she believed in herself. Jon insists that she must help with the fight. Davos speaks in Jon's defense and lists some of his achievements, surprising Dany and Tyrion with a reference to taking a dagger to heart. Dany learns that her Dornish and Greyjoy forces were attacked by Euron Greyjoy, captured and destroyed. Dany allows Jon to mine dragonglass from Dragonstone, which is an efficient weapon against the White Walkers. Jon and Dany continue to butt heads, and Dany implies that she does not believe Jon's claim of ice zombies. Tyrion devises another plan, for the Unsullied to take Casterly Rock through a secret passage. Instead, Unsullied are attacked by Euron Greyjoy. Jon shows Dany the cave paintings he discovered, showing children of the forest and the First Men fighting against the White Walkers. This finally convinces Dany to help and promises to do so if he bends the knee. Dany then learns that the Tyrell forces were also defeated. She is enraged and blames Tyrion for these losses. She wants to fly to the Red Keep and burn it to the ground, but before her mind is set, she asks Jon for advice. He says that Dany should not burn castles, because that will make her as bad as Cersei. Daenerys takes the Dothraki to attack Jaime and Randyll Tarly after they sacked Highgarden, with Daenerys leading them on a dragon. Daenerys looks for an easy victory, but Bronn fires a scorpion at her, which pierces Drogon's wing, and he loses balance. Drogon manages to land safely, and Dany attempts to take the arrow from his body. Jaime takes it as an opportunity to try and kill Dany, and right before he is to be burned by a dragon, Bronn saves him by throwing him into the water. Those who survive the battle are offered to bend the knee and be allowed to live and return home. Randyll and Deacon Tarly are among those who refuse. Tyrion offers them to join the Night's Watch, but they also refuse, and Daenerys executes them by dragonfire. Dany returns to Dragonstone, and Drogon allows himself to be touched by Jon, which surprises Dany. Jorah Mormont returns, having been cured from grayscale. Jon wishes to return north, and Daenerys wonders if he can defend the north with so few men. Jon wants more plaids for her to go with him, but she says she can't, else Cersei will gain an upper hand. Tyrion suggests that they might convince Cersei to join forces with them against the White Walkers if they prove to her that the threat is viable. Jon and a few chosen men lead a White Hand mission. Tyrion and Dany talk, and he criticizes her for killing Randyll and Deacon, saying that she should have been more merciful or given them more time to think, but that nonetheless he believes in the better world she wants to build. When Dany receives a message asking for help, she ignores Tyrion trying to stop her and flies beyond the wall with all 3 of her dragons, saving Jon's party. The Night King kills Viserion. The party escapes, but Jon stays behind. However, he returns, and when he is being treated, Dany sees Jon's scars that confirm that he really was killed and brought back to life. Dany now firmly concludes that she will halt her conquest and help Jon, and he willingly chooses to bend the knee, assuring that his people will also become loyal to Dany. The party brings a white to King's Landing and shows it to Cersei. Seeing this, Jaime wants to aid the North. Cersei promises to not attack Daenerys or hinder the fight, but demands that Jon Snow takes no sides in the conflict between Dany and Cersei. Jon, however, reveals that he already pledged to Dany, enraging everyone present. Tyrion tries to talk some sense into Cersei, while Jon and Dany discuss Dany's alleged infertility. When Tyrion returns, he says that the Lannister forces will aid the fight against the White Walkers. As Dany and Jon sail to Winterfell, they consummate their relationship. Dany arrives at Winterfell, with everyone looking at her and her forces with hostility, and with Sansa being notably cold. Sansa complains about being unable to feed an army and 2 dragons, and when she asks what do dragons eat, Dany responds whatever they want. Dany and Jon visit the dragons, who eat less due to their dislike of the North. They then fly respectively on Drogon and Rhaegal. Dany then meets Sam to thank him for curing Jorah from grayscale. She is forced to reveal that she killed his brother and father, which makes him harden against her. Suddenly Jaime arrives at Winterfell, wanting to join the fight. He is allowed to only when Brienne vouches for him. Dany and Sansa then talk privately, with Sansa expressing that she fears Dany may have ulterior motives, but Dany assures her that this is not the case. They, however, do not reach an agreement regarding northern independence. Right before the battle, Jon reveals that he is a legitimate son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, thus having a better claim to the throne than Dany. The battle begins. When Dany's Dothraki charge is slaughtered, Dany rushes to battle on Dragonback, and Jon follows her on Rhaegal. They burn a lot of whites, but then are attacked by the Night King flying on resurrected Viserion. Jorah dies defending Dany. After the battle, during the celebratory feast, Daenerys is in a bad mood, hearing Tormund praise Jon for the things she also did, and feeling isolated. Jon becomes more distant to Dany due to learning that they are aunt and nephew. Dany says that Jon telling her of his true identity made her miserable, and that her claim is compromised. While Jon insists that he does not want the throne, that does not really matter. Dany asks him to not reveal the truth to his family, and he says that he owes it to them, certain that his sisters will keep a secret. As Dany's fleet returns from the north, they are attacked by Euron's forces, who kill Rhaegal. Euron captures Missandei and she is executed in front of Dany and Grey Worm. Depressed Daenerys refuses to eat and becomes paranoid. She learns that Varys tried to poison her and betray her for Jon, after learning the truth of his parentage from Sansa. Just like she promised, she burns him alive for treason. Dany tries to explain her reasoning for killing Varys to Jon, who still assures her that he does not want the crown and will continue to support her. They kiss, but then Jon hesitates, and this makes Dany decide that she will embrace ruling by fear. Dany decides to attack King's Landing, and Tyrion resists this idea, saying that Daenerys must accept surrender if it comes, which will be signaled by the sound of the bells. Daenerys easily destroyed Euron's fleet and Cersei's Golden Company, and allows her armies to get inside. The city rings the bells, but Dany burns all of King's Landing anyway, while her armies kill and rape. After her success, she announces to her armies that she liberated the city and that she will not stop until all of the world is free. Tyrion resigns as Hand and Dany imprisons him. Tyrion then convinces Jon to kill Daenerys. Before Daenerys can sit on the throne, she is confronted by Jon and is deaf to his pleas to consider what she's done. Dany embraces Jon and asks him to help her break the will and build a better world. Jon swears himself to her one last time and then thrusts a dagger into her breast and she dies in silence. Her last remaining dragon burns the Iron Throne, takes her body and flies away. Anyone who's ever heard of Game of Thrones knows that it's an exceptionally brutal show. Be it a terrible slaughter at a wedding, numerous executions, epic battles with thousands of casualties, severed limbs, vicious sword fights, magical napalm, a boy jogging to death on his wedding, a man having molten gold poured over his head, you name it. Westeros, and more broadly Planetos, have not heard of Geneva Conventions. They do not have a concept of a war crime. As far as they are concerned, all moves are allowed. In the name of the elusive Game of Thrones, the nobles were willing to commit the worst atrocities known to man. And nobody had a problem with it, except for when that noble's name was Daenerys Targaryen. This is not news to anyone, since fans of the original book version of the story treat her in the same exact way, and also assume her to go mad and evil in the future one way or another, for committing some acts of brutality that everyone else is also doing. In the books, however, Dany is the only character who ponders the ramifications of the use of violence, tries to avoid it, and is overall quite critical of it. She expresses similar sentiments in the show, though not nearly as often. She also does not commit a good 90% of the violence for her own benefit, but for her people, the freedmen of Essos. This was also the case in a large portion of Game of Thrones, the TV show. Yet, even if Dany did commit violence for her own benefit, this should be in no way different from other characters doing it for the same reasons. And yet, Daenerys was still singled out, and her use of violence was uniquely pathologized. David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, the main showrunners of Game of Thrones, spoke about Daenerys' turn in Season 8, Episode 5, in an Inside the Episode featurette.
Dany's an incredibly strong person. She's also someone who has had really close friendships and close advisors for her entire run of the show. You look at those people who have been closest to her for such a long time, and almost all of them have either turned on her or died, and she's very much alone. And that's a dangerous thing for someone who's got so much power to feel that isolated. So at the very time when she needs guidance and those kind of close friendships and advice the most, everyone's gone. Jon Snow is someone that she's fallen in love with, and as far as she's concerned, by this point, Jon has betrayed her by telling people about his true identity, and also the fact that he's unable to return her affections at this point.
All right, then. Let it be fear.
I think that when she says let it be fear, she's resigning herself to the fact that she may have to get things done in a way that isn't pleasant, and she may have to get things done in a way that is horrible to lots of people.
Mercy is our strength. Our mercy towards future generations. He will never again be held hostage by a tyrant.
She chose violence. A Targaryen choosing violence is a pretty terrifying thing.
From these words, we see the reasoning for Dany's turn being 1. She lost a lot of people close to her in a very short span of time. 2. Jon Snow is no longer romantically interested in her. 3. Jon Snow betrayed her by revealing his true identity to his family, who in turn made it basically public knowledge. 4. She is a Targaryen who chose violence. First reason is perhaps the most solid one, though it must be said that Daenerys was losing people close to her left and right. She lost her brother, an unborn son, and her husband, her handmaids and her Kalasar, Barristan Solmy. Of course, losing close ones left and right is certainly not something one gets used to, and there probably comes a moment when you lose too much and lose it. but crucially, Dany's previous pattern of behavior shows that she never reacted with senseless violence directed at just about anyone if she lost someone. If she took revenge for the deaths of her loved ones, it was always against those who were responsible for their demise. Take for instance Barristan Selmy being killed in Season 5. Dany reacts to this by killing 2 slaving nobles. The anger over the death of her close one is directed at the people who lead the domestic terrorist organization that was behind the murder, not some innocent civilians. It was the same already in Season 1, when she took revenge on Miri Mesdur for killing her child and husband. The anger and grief she has over the loss of her loved ones is directed at the people responsible. Always, no exception aside from the second to last episode. In The Bells, Dany's anger is somehow not directed at Cersei, who was the one who ordered Missandei's death. If, for instance, Dany only flew and destroyed the Red Keep with Cersei in sight, taking revenge for the deaths of her best friend solely on the one responsible, it would be consistent with her previous behavior. However, Dany carpet bombing the city does not logically follow from her previous behavior. Dany never took out her anger on innocents. Dany never intentionally targeted innocents. In fact, back in Season 3, she is already resolute in her principle that she is not willing to let innocents suffer, this being the whole reason why it took her so long to make it to Westeros. She could not just leave the mistreated slaves to their fates. The choice to destroy the entire city before she even considers targeting Cersei is there for one reason only: to be as shocking, violent and indefensible as possible, to make Dany as monstrous as possible, and to leave no ambiguity towards her final turn whatsoever, lest you take her side when Jon sneaks on her to kill her. Now let's address point number 2. Daenerys woman scorned. When Jon Snow learns that he is Daenerys' nephew, he loses romantic interest in her. This is one of the things that is not really consistent with the world building of Westeros. While Targaryens are the only family in Westeros to practice sibling incest, cousin marriages or aunt-nephew and uncle-niece marriages are exceedingly common among all the nobles, just like they were among real monarchy and nobility. Jon's reaction of disgust towards this reveal is baseless, because the society he lives in does not perceive this as incest, and neither should he. So Jon rejects her, and it sends her over the edge. Let it be fear, because he does not want to kiss her back. This is an example of a very old trope in literature: woman scorned. This expression comes from the 17th century play The Morning Bride by William Congreve. Heaven has no rage like love to hatred turned, nor hell a fury like a woman scorned. This expression means essentially that a woman whose romantic advances are rejected becomes a terrible, dangerous thing to behold. This is, of course, an extremely misogynistic belief that makes women's romantic lives central to their being, and only allows for women's anger to exist if it's due to a romantic rejection. And once that anger is roused, it becomes the scariest thing ever. For Daenerys Targaryen, who was never defined by her romantic interests, to undergo such a character assassination because a guy did not return her kiss seems especially infuriating to me, and proof of showrunners falling into the most textbook storytelling sexism within the last season. The third reason Dany turned towards violence was because she believed Jon betrayed her by revealing the truth about his identity to his family, who in turn shared it further. That he is in fact a legitimate son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, and thus has a stronger claim to the throne than Daenerys because of his sex, and being about 9 months older than her. There are 3 major problems with that, one of which becomes apparent only in retrospect. First problem is that Jon does not want the throne and made it very clear. Abdication is a thing that's allowed in this world. All Jon needs to do is publicly announce it. If that's impossible, the issue is easily solved by marriage, especially since the two of them are already in love. And like I explained, but she's his aunt is nothing more but a convenient anachronism to not make this issue solvable. Aunt-nephew marriages are not considered incest in Westeros, and there are no laws preventing such a marriage. If Jon does not want the throne, he can just be a consort. That's possible. Problem solved. Second problem is Daenerys' wish to not reveal the truth about Jon's parentage and legitimacy to the world. Given the history of the world revealed in the prequel, Daenerys is 100% justified in wishing this to stay a secret. The sad reality of Westeros is that a male relative is the biggest threat to a woman's claim, and by extension, her life and well-being. The Dance of the Dragons is all you need to see it. Rhaenyra Targaryen, King's chosen heir, is usurped by her half-brother and brutally killed by him in a war that started due to her gender, because a male relative is always a threat to a woman's claim. Jon is a threat to her. She has every right to feel betrayed that he revealed the secret, compromising her safety. Given the precedent in universe, Jon's claim was not only a threat to her ambitions, but to her life and well-being as well. And funnily enough, she is vindicated in this belief, but the narrative ignores it and does not acknowledge it as her being vindicated.
I've served tyrants most of my life. They all talk about destiny.
She's a girl who walked into a fire with 3 stones and walked out with 3 dragons. How could she not believe in destiny?
Perhaps that's the problem. Her life has convinced her that she was sent here to save us all.
And how do you know she wasn't?
Then there's the problem of Jon Snow. Perhaps it's actually a solution. You know them both. Tell me, who do you think would make a better ruler?
He doesn't want the throne. That's why he bent the knee.
Have you considered the best ruler might be someone who doesn't want to rule?
We're discussing treason.
Don't pretend you haven't thought about it.
Of course I've thought about it. Thoughts aren't treason.
He's temperate and measured. He's a man, which makes him more appealing to the lords of Westeros, whose support we are going to need.
Joffrey was a man. I don't think a cock is a true qualification, as I'm sure you'd agree.
And he's the heir to the throne. Yes, because he's a man, cocks are important, I'm afraid. And? Nothing.
She won't eat.
We'll try again at supper.
I think they're watching me.
Who?
Her soldiers.
Of course they are. That's their job. What have I told you, Martha?
The greater the risk, the greater the reward.
Go on. They'll be missing you in the kitchen.
Once Varys learns of Jon's claim, he immediately switches allegiance to him, specifically because he is a man, and in spite of Dany warning him that if he ever switches allegiances again, something he's done before. Under the previous regime, he almost had her assassinated and she forgave him, mind you. She will burn him alive. And what does he try to do? Tries to kill Daenerys. And yet her executing him for treason that she warned him about, after an attempt to literally assassinate her, even though she did nothing wrong at this point, to remove her from Jon's path, is framed as wrong and evil nonetheless. Now let's address point number 4. A Targaryen choosing violence is pretty terrifying. This mindset is emblematic of the double standard applied to Daenerys. Everyone else is allowed to engage in war, conquest, and use of violence. A Lannister choosing violence is not pretty terrifying. A Stark choosing violence is not pretty terrifying. Even Jon choosing violence is not pretty terrifying, even though the show does try to push him as a Targaryen. Thus, Daenerys is singled out, and she is the one to bear the brunt of the stigma attached to the last name Targaryen. And the showrunners cannot agree with their past selves either. In a featurette inside the episode for Season 6, Episode 9, they say,
I think Dany's been becoming a Targaryen ever since the end of Season 1.
She's not her father, and she's not insane, and she's not a sadist, but there's a Targaryen ruthlessness that comes with even the good Targaryens.
Either they lie to their audience or contradict themselves here, and I honestly don't know which is worse. One more comment that I have to this is that if you come out of reading A Song of Ice and Fire believing that Westerosi houses are like Hogwarts houses and that they are borderline biologically wired to have certain mindsets, then you did not comprehend this book properly. Unfortunately, the showrunners are far from the only ones to have this sort of mindset. That is a lot of internal contradictions in the showrunners' reasoning, and it's just a few sentences. If this was their grand plan all along, like it is claimed, then they did a pretty terrible job in resolving it. They had to bend the rules of the universe to their preferred narrative, make the characters suddenly have modern sensibilities, and ignore all the solutions to the conflicts that were just lying on the ground and all they had to do is have someone pick it up. If this was the plan all along, the situation would be far more complicated, more difficult to solve, and not reduced to cocks are important and Targaryens choosing violence bad, while everyone else can slaughter others as they please. It's almost as if these are not the things the showrunners had in mind when they were writing the script. It's almost as if these are mere excuses to justify that turn. Excuses that do not hold water under the slightest scrutiny, because they failed to provide any setup. Already from these justifications, you see that they did not have any coherent plan all along. They simply wanted it, scrambled for justifications, and decided to lull their audience into compliance, which largely worked. And we haven't even gotten to the actual foreshadowing. The showrunners then continue to explain their creative choices. And one thing I want to note before we listen to them is that if you need to explain your characters' choices in featurettes and interviews, you didn't write your show well enough for it to be apparent from the story itself. But that's a side note. Let's listen.
Even when you look back to season 1, when Khal Drogo gives the Golden Crown to Viserys and her reaction on watching her brother's head melted off.
He was no dragon.
And he was a terrible brother, so I don't think anyone out there was crying when Viserys died, but there is something kind of chilling about the way that Dany has responded to the death of her enemies.
We have the first claim that may fall under the broad umbrella of foreshadowing. What exactly is that foreshadowing, you may ask? Per TV tropes. A clue or allusion embedded in the narrative that predicts some later event or revelation. It could be a wayward comment or action, an event that doesn't make sense until later, a meaningful name, a rare blood type. So many things can warn us of the future. The foreshadowing may be ominous, or mildly suggestive, or it could merely be obvious in hindsight. Good foreshadowing doesn't spoil the surprise, yet seems an obvious clue in retrospect. Bad foreshadowing either deflates the suspense or is too obfuscated to predict anything, and capable of being overused. Foreshadowing may establish something to avoid an asspull. In order to convince their audience that the plan was always to make Dany mad and evil, that this is something they had in mind already in season 1, they invoke the scene of Viserys' death. Out of context, it does seem pretty terrible. Her brother has molten gold poured over his head, and she only looks at him in silence, with a blank expression. But now, let's see what kind of relationship they had before this happened.
You still slouch. Let them see. You don't want to wake the dragon, do you?
No.
We go home with an army. With Khal Drogo's army. I would let his whole tribe fuck you. All 40,000 men and their horses too, if that's what it took.
You dare! You give commands to me! To me! You do not command the dragon. I am Lord of the Seven Kingdoms. I don't take orders from savages or their sluts. Do you hear me?
You've no right to a braid. You've won no victories yet.
You do not talk back to me. You are a horse-lord slut, and now you've woken the dragon.
And now let's see what happens immediately before Viserys is crowned.
I want what I came for. I want the crown he promised me. He bought you, but he never paid for you. Tell him I want what was bargained for, or I'm taking you back. He can keep the baby. I'll cut it out and leave it for him.
So, from this, we can gather that Viserys and Daenerys do not necessarily have a good relationship, and it's not Daenerys' fault. It's Viserys who sells Daenerys, sexually abuses her, says he would be willing to have men and horses gang rape her, and physically abuses her on numerous occasions. Right before Viserys is crowned, he says that he is going to plunge a sword into pregnant Dany's stomach and take out her baby, which would kill both her and the child. It's also worth noting that carrying a sword in Weiss is forbidden, which means that Viserys would have signed a death sentence on himself even if he did not threaten the child of the most powerful man in the room. Once you have this in mind, you realize that this isn't just a sister looking at her brother being killed, expressionless, or a woman looking at the death of her enemy. It's a girl sold by her brother, who endured his physical, mental, and sexual abuse, who tried to make amends with him but failed, and who now broke the sacred laws and threatened to kill her and her child. This scene, and the justification behind using it as a setup for the Mad Queen turn, is just fucking weird. What was Dany supposed to do? Fall on the floor and beg Drogo to spare Viserys? Let herself be killed by him? You will notice as we go further that the foreshadowing will often involve precisely that. Situations in which the only possible alternative for Daenerys will be forgiving people who violate her, or letting herself be violated. I would also question whether Daenerys' expression is called in this situation. I wish I had a script for this particular episode to know whether this is how Emilia Clarke was directed, but I was not able to find it. I seriously doubt that this expression is called. To me, this expression is more so blank. As in, it's like Daenerys is dissociating. Dissociation is one of the ways a human mind deals with witnessing traumatic events. Dissociation usually involves a feeling of disconnection from your body or the world around you. While this is a video about the show, in the books, that Daenerys dissociates during this scene becomes even more apparent. She describes Viserys as someone who was once her brother, but not anymore, and is strangely calm. You cannot deny that Dany is experiencing a traumatic event. Her lifelong abuser barged into Dothraki's sacred place with a sword, threatening to kill her and her child. Nobody controls the reactions they have in response to traumatic events, and having one reaction ahead of the other is not indicative of something being wrong with the person who has them. All of the reactions to trauma and abuse are normal. It would be normal if she started crying. It would be normal if she was angry. It is normal that she has a cold reaction. Pathologizing this particular response is, once again, criticizing Daenerys for having a completely normal psychological reaction to something, and essentially telling people who have those reactions in response to abuse that something is wrong with them as well. Using this scene to further Daenerys' madness foreshadowing agenda becomes borderline disturbing when you learn that homicide is the leading cause of death in pregnant women in the US. Women in the US are more likely to die from homicide than from sepsis or other related issues arising before and after birth. Let that sink in, and then look back at what these showrunners are saying. Her having a cold reaction towards a man who tried to kill her, for the most common reason a pregnant woman can be killed in the culture D&D come from, means she is mad. I encourage you guys to find a pregnant woman and ask her what she would do if someone from her family threatened to cut her baby out of her stomach. I can assure you, most of them would not react the way Daenerys did. They would probably physically attack them. Whatever the case, I'm sure that if Dany did fall to her knees and beg for mercy for Viserys, some people would also use it as a sign of maladjustment, because she wants mercy for a man who wanted to kill her. Let us now move on to other points the showrunners are making.
And if circumstances had been different, I don't think the side of Dany ever would have come out. If Cersei hadn't betrayed her, if Cersei hadn't executed Missandei, if Jon hadn't told her the truth, like if all these things had happened in any different way, then I don't think we'd be seeing this side of Daenerys Targaryen.
I don't think she decided ahead of time that she was going to do what she did. And then she sees the Red Keep, which is to her the home that her family built when they first came over to this country 300 years ago. It's in that moment on the walls of King's Landing when she's looking at that symbol of everything that was taken from her, when she makes the decision to make this personal.
How I understand these words is that if circumstances had been different, that side of Dany wouldn't have resurfaced. That if Cersei didn't kill Missandei, and if she didn't lose all of her close ones, she would never decide to go mad and burn King's Landing. So, this is sort of an admission that Dany going mad was done for plot convenience reasons. Because she becomes bad in response to the obstacles they gave her in this particular season, and admit that if all of this didn't happen, Dany would continue to be a well-adjusted individual. You will notice that a lot of things had to fall into place for this particular development. For example, somehow Euron had to surprise Dany with an assault on Dragonstone, with her being unable to see his fleet in spite of flying. He is able to get a 1 in a million shot to take out Rhaegal, like he is made out of paper, when a flying dragon should essentially be invincible, and the only known case of a dragon being killed mid-air was precisely one lucky shot in the eye, which didn't happen to Rhaegal. Somehow Euron is able to, out of everyone present, kidnap her best friend. So they specifically wrote these insane plot developments that bordered on impossibility because they could not have otherwise pushed for this development organically. That contradicts what they say, because according to them, even Season 1 Dany was maladjusted to some degree. I also do not fully comprehend the statement that Dany did not really want to burn King's Landing until she saw the Red Keep, which is her home and also the symbol of everything that's been taken away from her, and that she decides to make it personal. This statement would make sense if Dany did indeed just fly there and destroy the Red Keep. But before that, she carpet bombs the city as well. If she wants to destroy the Red Keep so much, why does she take time to destroy all of King's Landing beforehand? And why would this be personal against Cersei? One of the things that always strike me as a bit ridiculous in the scenes of Dany carpet bombing the city is Cersei looking horrified. You want me to believe that Cersei, who already blew people up with magical napalm, was paraded through the streets of King's Landing naked, and all the peasants laughed at her, would be personally affected by them dying by dragonfire? Honestly, by all means, Cersei should smile and cheer on her. And if Dany wanted to make it personal with Cersei, why does she kill everyone but Cersei? Cause Cersei is not even killed by Dany directly. What happens on screen does not logically follow from the words of the showrunners. She destroys all of King's Landing to make it personal for Cersei, who should not give a fig about the innocent civilians, and kills everyone but Cersei, who dies from the building collapsing, and not from dragonfire. This is the showrunners allegedly describing their thought process as they were writing these scenes, and somehow I do not buy a single one of them. And before anyone says that it's just my Dany extremist biased, neither do the comments. The video itself was originally posted on YouTube, has a staggering like to dislike ratio, and the people have this to say.
Daenerys is so angry at Cersei that she kills the whole city but not Cersei. Pure logic. She kind of forgot Cersei, D&D. This is an insult to the intelligence of the viewers. Do they seriously believe people follow that explanation? By their logic, Sansa should also be on Mad Queen watch for smiling as Ramsay's hounds tore him apart. She makes the decision to make things personal, by torching all the innocent instead of burning Cersei? Oh okay. Hey, remember when Dany locked her dragons away, permanently stunting their growth because one them burned one kid? Why are they saying, I don't think this, I don't think that, I don't think Dany, etc. What do you mean you don't think? You wrote it, you utter melts. You're the only people who should know exactly what the characters are thinking and going to do. There's something kind of chilling about the way that Dany has responded to the death of her enemies. Dumb and dumber, it's almost like they forgot Sansa having the same look and even grinning when Ramsay was being eaten alive by dogs, or when Arya went full Hannibal killing the Freys and turning them into pie to have Valder Frey eat them. They said that her sign of madness when her brother died and she didn't react. I guess they forgot about the fact that he abused her psychologically and threatened her child.
One of the things the showrunners did not necessarily take into consideration is that their choice to make Dany burn King's Landing recontextualized not only the choices she makes throughout her journey that supposedly led to it, but also other seemingly unrelated scenes. I will discuss two of those that come to my mind. Season 1, Episode 10, Daenerys wakes dragons from stone. Let's watch.
Blood of my blood.
Beautiful, uplifting, absolutely magical scene. What a way to end this season. And now remind yourself of the inevitable. In 7 years, this cute little dragon will become a beast that burns alive thousands of innocent civilians. The girl who lost everything, walked into the flames and lived, bringing back dragons from almost 2 centuries of extinction, will become an insane tyrant and objectively the worst person in the show. This scene thus is no longer uplifting and beautiful. It's the birth of an insane evil tyrant. Given that the showrunners want us to believe that already in season 1 there was something wrong with Dany, why is it not shown in any way that this is the beginning of something terrible? Not even a single hint is given to it. Not in the framing, not in the musical cues, nothing. This scene is straightforwardly uplifting and magical. But let us assume that maybe the idea for Dany's end was still not properly thought of or fleshed out in season 1. As such, let's pick a scene much further into the story. Season 6, episode 10, The Winds of Winter. Daenerys Targaryen sails to Westeros. Surely at the end of season 6, it should already be clear in the author's minds that Daenerys is gonna end up as the biggest baddie of the show, ahead of literal ice zombies, with the biggest kill count as well, ahead of the likes of Ramsay Bolton and Tywin Lannister. So why is this scene portrayed as uplifting and powerful? This is the biggest villain of this story, a mad Targaryen, coming to give fire and blood to the continent, a foreign evil invader that, a year from now, will slaughter thousands of innocent people. This begs the question, when exactly was it decided that Dany will burn King's Landing and be the final villain of the series? If foreshadowing goes as early as season 1, with the claims that Dany's reaction to Viserys dying is a sign of maladjustment, when precisely was it decided? When were we supposed to realize that we root for the bad guy, if we do not even get a simple audiovisual cue? Why make the scene of Dany sailing to Westeros so grand and uplifting if it should be anything bad? I can already see the defense to this, but you were meant to be tricked. This was meant to be a surprise. But that's just bad writing, because 1, a plot twist without proper setup is asshole, and 2, even according to showrunners, we were supposed to see those clues, right? And what are these clues? That she kills people? Everyone in the series does that. That she's sometimes cruel and ruthless when dealing with her enemies? Everyone in the series is like that. If she's uniquely bad in spite of doing what everyone else is doing, the only possible clue has to be audiovisual. Thus, why is she so consistently presented as heroic, badass and uplifting in those audiovisual clues? Easy. Because it's false that they intended for this ending for Dany since the very beginning, as is often claimed. Foreshadowing is intentional, hence, if they did not write this intentionally, there was no foreshadowing. They wrote these scenes years ago, then they decided for Dany to have this ending, and looked at her past actions to search for justifications. There is bad foreshadowing. There is good foreshadowing. But what the showrunners of Game of Thrones show us was neither. The only moment when, in my eyes, they began framing Daenerys as someone who is not in the right was in Season 7, specifically in the scene of Dany executing the Tireless.
I know what Cersei has told you. That I've come to destroy your cities, burn down your homes, murder you and orphan your children. That's Cersei Lannister, not me. I'm not here to murder. And all I want to destroy is the wheel that has rolled over rich and poor, to the benefit of no one but the Cersei Lannisters of the world. I offer you a choice. Bend the knee and join me. Together, we will leave the world a better place than we found it. Or refuse. And die. Step forward, my lord. You will not kneel?
I already have a queen.
My sister. She wasn't your queen until recently, though, was she? When she murdered your rightful queen and destroyed House Tyrell for all time. So it appears your allegiances are somewhat flexible.
No easy choices in war. Say what you will about your sister, she was born in Westeros. She's lived here all her life. You, on the other hand, murdered your own father, and chose to support a foreign invader, one with no ties to this land, with an army of savages at her back.
You will not trade your honor for your life. I respect that.
Perhaps he could take the black, Your Grace. Whatever else he is a true soldier. He'll be invaluable at the wall.
You cannot send me to the wall. You are not my queen.
You will have to kill me too.
Step back and shut your mouth.
Who are you?
A stupid boy.
I'm Dickon Tarly, son of Randall Tarly.
You are the future of your house. This war has already wiped one great house from the world. Don't let it happen again. Bend the knee.
I will not.
Your Grace, nothing scrubs bold notions from a man's head like a few weeks in a dark cell.
I meant what I said. I'm not here to put men in chains. If that becomes an option, many will take it. I gave them a choice. They made it.
Your Grace, you stop beheading entire
I'm
families.
not beheading anyone.
Your Grace.
Lord Randall Tarly, Dickon Tarly. I, Daenerys of House Targaryen, first of my name, breaker of chains and mother of dragons, sentence you to die. Dracarys.
Even though they also relied on double standards here, since what she does is perfectly reasonable within the universe. She was unusually reliant on them anyway, and other characters did not receive this framing when they were executing people for less, like Jon Snow and Janos Slynt. Tyrion later chiding her for killing them for explicitly resisting her, as would every other lord or monarch in the series, is absurd given how much choices and mercy she's shown them already, but at the very least the crucial framing was there. With the way the camera shows her, the opposition of her advisors that she disregards, and musical clues that lead us a certain way. If they wanted to turn us against Daenerys from the very beginning in a subtle way, this is how they should be doing it. Now, I have a tinfoil theory that, at the moment, I am not entirely and decisively able to prove. I might try and search for more proof of this in future videos, but as of now, I will just share what has been bugging me since 2019. I believe that D&D were aiding themselves with forums and fan theories when writing. This inevitably led them towards fan service and playing favorites. For instance, they included Clegane Bowl in the Bells, made Sansa Queen in the North, and even took parts of the theories about Aegon VI Targaryen being more beloved by the people than Dany, giving it to Jon. Now a bit more tinfoil. In 2013, as the show was catching up with the books, George R.R. Martin told creators D&D in greater detail about his ending. And all of a sudden, right after season 4, several major players in the story, Jon Con, Young Griff, Aryan, were completely removed from the show. These characters could all be connected to the burning of King's Landing in the books, especially Jon Con. So why was he removed? I believe I know the answer. Because showrunners disliked the idea of a completely new character being responsible for such a major disaster. My theory is that they did not have an idea how to go about it, went online, saw the popularity of the Mad Queen Daenerys theory, and decided to make the final twist of the story being Daenerys burning King's Landing, just like the fans of the books want her to, and actively started writing towards it only in season 7. There is a fairly convincing point made by the Dragon Demands that the original plan had Dany accidentally set off the caches of wealth underneath King's Landing. This accidental burning, however, is also a very popular theory online. I see no other reason why Jon Con was removed, and why they decided to take so many creative liberties if they knew the ending so well. This would also fit the loose timeline I created, about how they were only fully convinced to write Mad Queen Dany in season 7 and hence they did not yet frame Dany in a certain way in season 6. But that's just a speculation. Feel free to tell me how wrong I am. To end this part, I will show you a fragment of Why I Cannot Kill the Dragon, a book about the behind the scenes of the show. Right over there, he said, was where he sat with David Benioff, Dan Weiss, and Brian Cogman back in 2013, and revealed his long-held secret ending for A Song of Ice and Fire. By that time, it was clear to Martin that the show would have major divergences from his novels. During the pilot reshot, I visited the set on the Isle of Malta and met some of the new actors, Martin recalled. There was some crisis that occurred. The director called David and Dan over, and they were having some discussion about 10 feet away about how to handle it. And that was when I realized my baby wasn't entirely my baby anymore, because I wasn't part of that discussion. The director was talking to Dan and Dave. Nobody was saying, "George, come over and tell us your opinion." I didn't throw a tantrum or anything, Martin added calmly. I just came to the realization. I gave my baby up for adoption, and now there is a parent-teacher conference, and I'm not invited. What the characters say about Daenerys Targaryen is an extension of what the showrunners say, because characters are not independent beings, but I decided to separate these two. The characters offer some additional insights to Daenerys Targaryen that weren't mentioned in the Inside the Episode featurette. Let's discuss some of the things that happen before the big evil turn. In Season 7, Tyrion is suddenly very concerned with civilians and the use of violence in war. Tyrion, who in Season 2 blew up thousands of people with magical napalm. No character in the story but Daenerys was previously established as caring about innocence. All of a sudden, that seems to be the only thing Tyrion cares about. We can't attack King's Landing directly because of the innocents, even though there are ways to conduct the attack with minimal casualties, but the narrative requires that they don't exist, so they're not taken into account. Tyrion's advice continuously proves to be disastrous, and even then, Dany trusts him, God knows why. In Season 8, Tyrion, who in Season 4 said that he wished everyone in King's Landing died, after his advice brought nothing but severe weakening of Dany's forces, says that Dany can't attack King's Landing. He is so inept in his job that he is unable to create a battle plan that could minimize civilian casualties. He just says, sit around and do nothing else, you are evil. Nobody else was evil for engaging in battles. Nobody else was presumed to be evil if they wanted to reclaim their ancestral seat. Dany had an alternative plan in Season 7, flying to the Red Keep directly, but Tyrion disagreed with that as well. Characters in Season 7 suddenly developed modern sensibilities when convenient. Just like Jon Snow suddenly having a problem with incest that he should not logically perceive as incest, Tyrion is suddenly concerned with civilians, something no one but Daenerys was up to this point concerned with. Westeros doesn't even have a concept of civilians. Tyrion's plan is basically, let's hope Cersei will give us the castle. Maybe she will if we ask nicely. And while a nice sentiment in theory, this isn't the mindset Tyrion should have as a feudal lord. This is anachronistic. It's also hypocritical since he not only wanted to kill the people of King's Landing, but also used magical fire. He's a hypocrite who uses a double standard against Daenerys. You are evil for engaging in any war because you could hurt innocents, but everyone else can do it. You have to be above it, but even I don't have to be above it. This is also yet another sign that the writers needed to bend everything for that specific plot development, because it's not something that was at any point organic. When Dany does what she does, Tyrion tries to convince Jon Snow to betray Daenerys, and through a dialogue they have, we can see what he considered warning signs, or the elusive foreshadowing.
I can't justify what happened. I won't try. But the war is over now.
Is it? When you heard her talking to her soldiers, did she sound like someone who's done fighting? She liberated the people of Slaver's Bay. She liberated the people of King's Landing. And she'll go on liberating until the people of the world are free. And she rules them all.
And you've been by her side, counseling her. Until today.
Until today. Aerys was right. I was wrong. It was vanity to think I could guide her. Our queen's nature is fire and blood.
You think our house words are stamped on our bodies when we're born, and that's who we are? Ah, then I'd be fire and blood too. She's not her father, no more than your Tywin Lannister.
My father was an evil man. My sister was an evil woman. Pile up all the bodies of all the people they ever killed. There still won't be half as many as our beautiful queen slaughtered in a single day.
Cersei left her no choice.
The moment the gates fell, the battle was over.
She saw her friend beheaded. She saw her dragon shot out of the sky.
And she burned down a city for it.
Ah, it's easy to judge when you're standing far from the battlefield.
Would you have done it?
What?
You've been up there, on a dragon's back. You've had that power. Would you have burned the city down?
I don't know.
Yes, you do. You won't say because you don't want to betray her. But you know. Must it matter what I do? It matters more than anything. When she murdered the slavers of Astapor, I'm sure no one but the slavers complained. After all, they were evil men. When she crucified hundreds of Myronese nobles, who could argue they were evil men? The Dothraki carls she burned alive, they would have done worse to her. Everywhere she goes, evil men die, and we cheer her for it. And she grows more powerful and more sure that she is good and right. She believes her destiny is to build a better world for everyone. If you believed that, if you truly believed it, wouldn't you kill whoever stood between you and paradise?
This scene alone raises a lot of complex issues, hence the analysis of this frankly short exchange is going to be long, and I promise that at the very end we will get to the 3 instances Tyrion mentions that seem to be madness foreshadowing, the whole thing that this video is about. But before we do this, I need to discuss the whole context of this exchange, since I believe that the madness foreshadowing and the showrunners' ideology speaking through Tyrion are linked together. We will start with Jon's arguments. Tyrion says, "Our queen's nature is fire and blood," and Jon answers, "You think our house words are stamped on our bodies when we're born, and that's what we are. Then I will be fire and blood too." Jon is of course presented in this scene as an idiot in denial, but the showrunners accidentally make good points. They just don't truly realize it, and they certainly did not intend for this to be the case. Jon Snow says, "Our house words are not something we're biologically wired to follow, and that if this were the case, Jon would be all about fire and blood as well. Remember, the show very clearly made a Targaryen out of him. Of course, you are meant to disagree with Jon's assessment that Westerosi houses are not Hogwarts houses, and that members of said houses are not biologically wired to follow certain ideas, because this is not what the showrunners believe. Remember what D&D said, a Targaryen choosing violence is uniquely bad. Even good Targaryens are ruthless. So, they 100% believe that Targaryens are destined to embrace fire and blood sooner or later. They believe that Dany had to do it one way or another, even if they previously presented her as not a sadist, and one of the good ones, who is not like her father. But isn't Jon a Targaryen according to the showrunners as well? He himself brings up that he never chose fire and blood. We circle back to the same thing. Fire and blood, being a Targaryen, is only bad when it's Daenerys. Jon Snow being a Targaryen brings all the advantages. A claim to the Targaryen forged throne, dragon riding. Daenerys being a Targaryen brings only disadvantages. Madness, tyranny, embracing fire and blood sooner or later. And only in her case, violence is uniquely bad because she is a Targaryen. Tyrion is not wrong when he says that Dany committed a worse atrocity in a single day than Tywin in his entire life. But what is plain absurd is his assertion that Daenerys was going to become a Cersei or a Tywin, or someone even worse because she killed evil people. Tywin Lannister brutally repressed the Rain and Tarbeck rebellions for a mere slight. He conducted the brutal sack of, ironically, King's Landing, where his men raped and killed hundreds of innocent people. His man stabbed a toddler. His other man dashed a baby's head against the wall and then raped his mother with his blood and brains still on his hands, later killing her as well. He ordered the gang rape of his 13-year-old son girlfriend and then forced him to participate as well. In the current timeline, he ordered his men to ravage the Riverlands with impunity and orchestrated a slaughter at a wedding. All of this he does for power and control. Cersei Lannister blew up the equivalent of the Vatican with hundreds of people inside, put a formerly enslaved woman in chains and killed her in front of her best friend and a lover. All of this she does for power and control. Daenerys Targaryen killed people who owned people as chattel, killed, raped and mutilated them for thousands of years. All of this she does because she wants to create a world without slavery. Yet her previous trajectory is framed as equivalent to the crimes of Cersei and Tywin. Or worse, it is framed as worse, because it led to something far worse than Cersei and Tywin ever did. Thus, showrunners D&D believe that people who committed unspeakable violence for nothing but their selfish gain are ultimately better than Dany, Because Dany committing violence for the freedmen to create a better world would always and inevitably lead to her indiscriminately slaughtering civilians and committing worse atrocities than Tywin and Cersei, who did it all for themselves. I can assure you that if Jon and Daenerys switched places and he was freeing slaves while she was the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, nobody would ever have a problem with any of the things Dany did. Not only because she is a woman, but because she is Daenerys Targaryen. We can see it with the way even female characters are allowed to kill for revenge, while Dany is not allowed to kill to liberate. Targaryens choosing fire and blood bad, and Daenerys choosing fire and blood bad is a circle. It's not wrong to kill others for your own benefit if you're a Stark or a Lannister. It's wrong to kill in defense of your people if you're a Targaryen. Being a Targaryen is pathologized only in the case of Daenerys. Targaryens being considered uniquely bad for using violence in any context is bad because Daenerys is a Targaryen. Tyrion's words about Astapor and Meereen are very likely a reference to the very famous poem First They Came by Martin Niemöller, about how silence and indifference enabled the Nazis. First they came for the communists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out, because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. This reference clearly equates Daenerys with Nazism. This reference means freeing slaves is just like being a Nazi. Killing slave owners is like killing socialists, communists, and trade unionists. Killing slave owners is just like the Holocaust. Slave owners are like Jews. Tyrion is also very clearly speaking to the audience. You cheered for her when she was killing people who own human beings like chattel. You did not see her for what she is. Now you are complicit in what she did in King's Landing. You were wrong to support a woman who tried to end slavery. The problem with showrunners pointing fingers is that they themselves did not present 2 out of 3 of these events as bad when they were initially written and recorded. They did not frame them as bad, because at the point of writing and recording these scenes, they did not yet believe it, at least not for the 2 instances. Let's look at the scene of Dany's killing of slavers in Astapor.
Zadrizes buzdaris kos daor.
Itraji valere?
Nige Daenerys gel masmo hen Targaryen entrot. En Valeria wepoana garexan. Valeria munioengos nuihis isa. Dova gevi! Axia osentas, menti osentas! Kiloni pilos lyövale tolvi osenetas! Inini otrikatas! Urnei lyöi tolvei prisotas!
Aske, aske! Sesena! Sesena! Sesena!
Dracarys.
Their own script says that this is meant to be a scene of a villain in the making. This scene is supposed to disturb you. This scene is supposed to have at least a tiny bit of a clue that she's in the wrong here. That this move is what will lead to her indiscriminately massacring civilians 5 seasons later. Instead, she looks like the hero of an action movie. All her supporting cast, Missandei, Jorah and Barristan, approve of this. What in this scene is meant to give us even the smallest hint that something is wrong? Because the camera frames Dany as someone who clearly did something badass, as does the music. So, how are we supposed to see this as wrong? Sure, Dany is killing someone. So do other characters in this story, and for far more morally dubious reasons. Jaime Lannister, for instance, killed his cousin just to escape his confinement. Is this Jaime's madness foreshadowing? No. So why is this madness foreshadowing for Dany? Because she's biologically wired to be a certain way due to her last name? Because Targaryens are not allowed to use violence, even as a way to free slaves. Because only she has to be above it, else she's like her father. You can say that the reason why Dany is framed as badass in the Astapor scene was precisely so that we cheered for Dany only to be super surprised by her turn in Season 8. But the thing is, creating a compelling plot twist necessarily entails giving your audience hints to set plot twists. If this scene is meant to disturb the more eagle-eyed members of the audience, why is there not a single clue to it? Why, in order to believe it, you need to single Dany as uniquely bad for the use of violence? She isn't even the only person to use fire in wars, so why? I think it's good to contrast Walter White's turn with Daenerys' turn. Walt as an example of how to do it, and Dany as an example how to not do it. Walt as the case of something that was intended from the very beginning, while Dany as a case of something that was decided one last moment and pushed as legit. In the case of Walter, if you did pay attention instead of getting a boner from Walt's constant power trips, you see that what he says in the last episode, "I did it for me, I liked it, I was good at it," was there since the very beginning. We see a direct contradiction in Walt's assurances that this is for the family in the very first season. The fact that he would rather cook freaking meth than take Crescent's and Elliot's money. There is nothing to indicate that Daenerys' campaign in Slaver's Bay was false, or that she did it as a power trip the way Walter White did it. Because why would it be false? If she wanted a power trip, why didn't she just conquer these cities without freeing slaves? Why do so few people in Dany's supporting cast resist Dany's action? Sure, they might sometimes disagree with her methods, but one thing that differentiates her from, say, Aerys II Targaryen or precisely Walt, is that she usually listens, and they do not resist her original goal, freeing slaves, on moral grounds, but on pragmatic grounds. Usually, what about Westeros? Why are we not given musical cues? Why is she framed like an action hero? The thing about foreshadowing is that it is often visual. Take for instance the first season of Attack on Titan. When Eren recounts to the other cadets the fall of Shiganshina and speaks of the armored titan, the camera shifts to the guy who is the armored titan. This is how it was foreshadowed who he really is. So, where is the visual foreshadowing in Game of Thrones? This is expecting the audience to just know based on a gut feeling, or to just be enormously tricked. Have the rug pulled from beneath your feet because you haven't realized when we didn't do anything to help you realize, and now you're supposed to feel guilty. But how are you supposed to realize when, in order to single her out, you need to only be enraged and appalled by her violence and nothing else indicates that she's in the wrong? Why are you not supposed to be appalled at a girl baking people into pies and serving it to their father, but you are supposed to be appalled at a woman killing slave owners? While Walt's final turn is possible to predict already in Season 1, there is nothing in Game of Thrones Season 1 that would indicate that Dany will turn into someone who indiscriminately massacres civilians. In fact, in later seasons, her actions show that she is not willing to do that. There is a lot to indicate in Season 1 of Breaking Bad that Heisenberg is not just Walt's false persona. Walt's transformation into Heisenberg was not really a twist. It was something that was going to happen, and the seeds of Walt's downfall were planted as early as in the very first episode. Like, this show is called Breaking Bad and he eventually breaks bad. That does not necessarily mean that he was evil and bad from the very beginning. It means that the seeds of what he is about to become really were there, and he chose to cultivate them until they bloomed. We can give the showrunners the benefit of the doubt. We can believe that the people who wrote the universally critically panned Season 8 actually played 5D chess with us, all the time, and intentionally framed Dany's questionable choices in a badass, heroic manner to lull us into a false sense of security, and side with a woman who tries to end slavery. Or we could use Occam's razor to deduce that this is not foreshadowing, because it was not actually written with the intent of foreshadowing Dany burning King's Landing in Season 8, or more broadly, her descent into villainy. This scene was written to make Daenerys into a stone-cold badass. The showrunners had, however, decided on Daenerys burning King's Landing in Season 8, and knew that such a choice had to be justified in front of their audience, for whom Daenerys was a beloved character and a liberator of slaves. Thus, they returned to her previous actions and decided to try and recontextualize them. Foreshadowing has to be intentional, and it was not intentional. So what is it instead? A retcon. And what is a retcon? It's a shorthand for retroactive continuity. TV Tropes defines it as reframing or adding to past events to serve a current plot need. In its most basic form, a retcon is any plot point or detail that was not intended from the beginning, but treated as if it always had been. Contrast with the reveal, when the author usually intended such an addition from the beginning. The most preferred use is where it contradicts nothing, even though it was changed later on. Sometimes retcons are necessary when the author writes himself into a corner and cannot go back to change something. If done properly, it can work, but more often than not, retcons are derided by the audiences. What always surprised me is how little people realize that Dany's descent into madness was precisely a retcon, and not a foreshadowing. Perhaps because a lot of people in the audience had the same mindset as the showrunners, having a preconceived notion about Dany, believing that everything she was doing, no matter if good, bad, heroic, or even plain normal, was foreshadowing for them. It was pure confirmation bias. Thus, discourses about foreshadowing were everywhere, and if one is bombarded with this messaging, one must start believing it sooner or later. We can easily check whether Dany's turn is a retcon, or if it was careful foreshadowing, by comparing and contrasting Daenerys with other members of the cast to see if other characters had potential to turn into mad monarchs. Let's start with Sansa Stark, whose journey has some parallels with Dany's journey. Both girls start this story very young, both are in abusive situations, both witness deaths of their loved ones, both are subjected to sexual violence. Both eventually become queens. In Season 1, Episode 6, Daenerys' abusive older brother Viserys, after a lifetime of abuse, barges into Dothraki's sacred place with a sword and threatens to cut her child out of her belly. Dany's husband kills him, as Dany watches coldly. In Season 6, Episode 9, Sansa feeds her abusive rapist husband to his dogs, and at first looks at it coldly, then smiles upon hearing his cries of pain. According to the showrunners, one of them has a chilling reaction to the death of her enemy. If we randomly decided in Season 8 that Sansa will turn into a madwoman and let hundreds of innocent civilians be eaten alive by dogs, we could point out this scene and say, see, we foreshadowed it. She was like this all along. She already fed one man to his dogs. Don't you remember how she lied about the Trident situation to exonerate a psychopath who almost killed the lowborn boy? Don't you remember that she withheld information about Knights of the Vale, which led to hundreds of unnecessary deaths and her brother almost getting killed as well? Don't you remember where she gave up on saving her brother from Ramsay? It was foreshadowed. People would, of course, be able to call bullshit on this, because Sansa was never shown to be evil and bloodthirsty, nor has she ever killed or caused the deaths of innocent people on purpose. Her killing Ramsay was revenge on her abuser and rapist, arguably more extreme than Dany solely having a cold reaction to her own abuser dying, and everything else was simply a result of the circumstances she found herself in, not situations specifically written to point towards some future development. But you might say that Sansa is a Stark and not a Targaryen, and that's why her actions have a different weight, which I was already able to prove that this does not hold water either, and that it still requires applying a double standard. Then how about we compare Dany to another person who is explicitly considered to be a Targaryen? Jon Snow. Let's for a moment imagine that Rhaegal was not shot from the sky and Jon rides him into battle in King's Landing. Then he sees the Red Keep and decides to torch King's Landing. Fans are horrified, shocked, and angry at D&D, who rush to defend their narrative choice. Remember how Jon Snow beheaded a man pleading for mercy for merely refusing to follow an order. Remember how Jon Snow hanged a traumatized child. Remember when Jon Snow almost beat a man to death. Remember when Jon Snow recklessly charged into battle, condemning hundreds of his men to death. Remember, Jon is a Targaryen, and Targaryen choosing violence is pretty terrifying. It's always been there, you just refuse to see it. You were tricked into rooting for him. It was foreshadowed. In a show filled with so much violence, where even good people need to kill, it really is not that difficult to make out just about any character into a madman and a villain. Thus, in order for this twist to work, Dany would have to, at the very least, be consistently framed as a villain from the very beginning, if you want to avoid a double standard. This framing could have been very subtle. For instance, the framing of Walter White as a villain was very subtle, even in his arguably badass moments. Take the I am the danger scene.
Who are you talking to right now? Who is it you think you see? Do you know how much I make a year? I mean, even if I told you, you wouldn't believe it. Do you know what would happen if I suddenly decided to stop going into work? A business big enough that it could be listed on the NASDAQ goes belly up. Disappears. It ceases to exist without me. No, you clearly don't know who you're talking to, so let me clue you in. I am not in danger, Skylar. I am the danger. A guy opens his door and gets shot, and you think that of me? No. I am the one who knocks.
It's a man threatening his wife by framing himself as a scary, dangerous criminal. There is no badass music in the background. The shot of angry Walt is intertwined with the shots of a worried Skylar. It's a very intentional choice to have him stand and loom above her like that, domineering. It is Walter bragging that he is not above killing those who stand in his way. Walt also has an opposition in this scene, his wife, who wants him out, who's been consistently opposed to his power trips. Now compare this shot of Dany in Astapor. There is badass music. Dany is not framed looming over her victims and deriving some sort of a power trip from the depths of the masters of Astapor. Dany does not face opposition from her circle. Dany was consistently and straightforwardly framed as a hero this entire time, because the showrunners did not yet decide to make her into a villain. It was not like in Breaking Bad, where down to the very title we know that it's about a man who eventually breaks bad and was destined to break bad due to his very own choices. Walt is not a character that's subjected to any double standard to single him out as uniquely villainous character, in a sea of villainous characters either. The showrunners of Breaking Bad also did not have to resort to biological determinism to sell his turn. He is not like this because of his dad's genes. He is not like this because having a certain last name dooms people to become mad, evil tyrants. His own choices speak for him. His own pride speaks for him. His own pride directs him to do what he does. That's character development. Having to resort to assuming that being born in a certain family is enough to sell a certain turn for a character is lazy. As such, this scene of Dany killing the masters of Astapor was not foreshadowing. It was a retcon. It was a scene where she uses violence that the showrunners picked to support and justify Dany's choice to burn King's Landing in Season 8. But that choice logically does not follow from that action. Not if it has so many holes in it. Another important thing to note is that Walt has always been doing something that is decidedly morally wrong. Cooking meth is wrong, no matter if you do it for your family or not. And we know from the final episode that it was never about the family anyway. It was always a power grab. We also see how meth affects communities and families. But freeing slaves is decidedly morally right, no matter what kind of methods you employ in this endeavor. I will never ever ever change my mind regarding it. I will never let myself be tricked into believing that killing slave owners is wrong. I will never believe that Daenerys killing fucking Krasnys Monaclos was foreshadowing of her being evil. Argue with the wall. The showrunners of Breaking Bad made a very conscious choice to show the innocent victims of Walt's empire, or drug abuse more broadly. Spooge's child, Brock, Andrea, even Jesse and Jane to some degree. Game of Thrones did very little to show Dany's supposed victims. While not innocent, they are called evil men after all, they are framed as her victims and necessary precursors for the innocence of King's Landing. The showrunners established a continuity between them. If they wanted to show Dany's disregard for human life, why include the line, spare the children? Why not say, hey, kill everyone in Astapor? Or why not simply use the Unsullied to sack the city without freeing any slaves? Then sack Meereen and Yunkai and go give fire and blood in Westeros with your newly found resources. What kind of a power-obsessed tyrant stays in the city they don't want to stay it to rule it, instead of chasing their ultimate goal? This scene is not foreshadowing, because when it was recorded, nobody could frame it as such, because nobody yet knew that she was supposed to be the bad guy here. Hence, it can't be foreshadowing. Foreshadowing is intentional. It's a retcon. To drive the final nail in the coffin, the book Fire Cannot Kill the Dragon by James Hibbert detailed the behind-the-scenes of the show, with numerous interviews from the cast and crew. This is what they had to say about the scene in Astapor. The season contained one of the most critical moments for her character, Daenerys gaining an unsullied army. The sequence in Martin's A Storm of Swords is an emotional high point and clever turn of events. Having sailed from Karth to the slavers-based city of Astapor in hopes of gaining an army, Daenerys patiently negotiates with the sadistic slave trader Krasnys, Dan Hildebrand, who assumes she didn't understand his insult spoken in Valyrian, while Krasnys' translator, Missandei, Natalie Emanuel, slyly hid his rudeness in an effort to keep the peace. Daenerys agreed to give Krasnys a dragon, Drogon, in exchange for an army, but when the exchange was made, Daenerys revealed to the slave trader that she was quite naturally fluent in her ancestors' mother tongue. Daenerys ordered her soldiers, acquired just moments before, to slaughter the city's slave masters, and unleashed Drogon to torch Krasnus. A dragon is not a slave, Daenerys declared. The moment was not merely about trickery, spectacle, or achievement, but Daenerys is trusting her own instincts and playing the Game of Thrones for the first time. Emilia Clarke. Up to that moment, Dany relies on everybody else's opinion to form her own, because she didn't know any better. It's the biggest risk she's taken in her life, and everyone around her is assuming she will give Drogon up, which is ridiculous for the mother of a child. There's that moment of, is this going to work, or is this not going to work? Whether the Unsullied are going to respect her, and everything hangs in the balance. It's the moment she becomes who she was always destined to be. There's a thin line between braveness and madness, and she dances on that line. David Benioff, showrunner. The best kind of surprises aren't the ones that come out of nowhere. They're the ones where after you see it, you're asking yourself, why didn't I see that was coming? I remember reading that Daenerys was going to give up Drogon, going, oh, it's kind of disappointing that she's doing this. When her plan is revealed, I called done. It was one of those times when we were like, we gotta make this fucking show. Where in retrospect I should have seen it coming because George had laid out all the pieces. He had given you the clues. The budget's training sequence was shot in Morocco by director Alex Graves, who had to depict a slave uprising and the show's first major dragon attack using just a few concise shots. Alex Graves, director. It's one of those, there's no money to this, but if you pull this off, it's one of the greatest sequences of all time. Emilia Clarke. I couldn't wait to stick it to the man. I had been practicing that speech for weeks in my room. Dan Weiss. When we lit Krasnus on fire with the dragon, special effects supervisor Stuart Briston made a flamethrower on a pole up in the air. They shot the stuntman full in the face with a flamethrower. It was a shocking, powerful thing to watch, even as a stunt. This scene concluded with Daenerys looking triumphant as a series of explosions ignited behind her from Drogon's attack. Alex Graves. I came up with what's been called the Apocalypse Now shot, but we were filming in Morocco during the Arab Spring, when transporting high explosive into North Africa was not allowed. I didn't give up because that image of Emilia was so burned into my brain, so we smuggled the explosives into the country to do it. Emilia stood in front of these fireballs, and you could feel the heat and the shock wave from the explosions, and she didn't flinch. Emilia Clarke. Ian Glenn, who was consistently my mentor, was like, darling, come here, look at how well taken care of you are. All you have to do is stand in front of that, and all this shit is happening. I realized that was all I needed to do. And it felt so good. It felt so electric. It was like everyone who had ever fucked me off in my life, they had them all lined up. The narrative they were supposed to sell slipped here. Nowhere does it say that this scene was meant to be a setup for Dany's choice in Season 8, even though it was used by Tyrion as that very setup. Everyone talks about how epic this scene was, and what it meant for Daenerys, her starting to play the game. And none of the things they say point out to how Dany is ruthless, evil, or cruel for doing what she's doing. No, she is considered a stone-cold badass by just about everyone interviewed for this segment. The only thing that could be taken as a reference to madness foreshadowing is Clarke's comment that Dany was balancing in between bravery and madness in this scene, but that really is only when you squint really hard. One final thing is that, even if we chose to disregard all the reservations I have about Dany's mad evil turn, there is one thing that still needs to be discussed. How slaughtering innocent people does not logically follow from her killing people with position of authority. See, if the script was different, if the Golden Companies surrendered upon seeing a dragon and Dany massacred them anyway, and this was used as justification for her madness, then I would honestly not have as big of a trouble believing in it, because it would be a continuation of her previous behavior taken to the extreme. Daenerys never intentionally targeted non-combatants. If she was ever violent, it was violence against armies, combatants, or people with position of authority. The slave masters of Astapor were not innocent civilians. They were the leaders of the city and people who traded in human beings. This is not in any way different than other characters engaging in violence. So why is Daenerys doing it different? Because she's a Targaryen fire and blood? No, it's different because one last moment they decided on this plot development and needed to find justifications. Because it was not foreshadowing. It was a retcon. The same applies to the Masters of Meereen. Here the context is also cut. It's not like Dany barged into a city and decided to crucify people at random. It was also not hundreds. It was precisely 163. It's important because 100 might mean anything from 200 to 999. And these people were not innocent either. For one, even if they did resist the idea to crucify the children to taunt Daenerys, they still represented the ruling class of Meereen. This one, however, is perhaps the only instance of Dany being portrayed as being at least somewhat in the wrong and facing opposition from her team, so I will throw them a bone here. It would, however, work much better if they didn't show Dany regretting crucifying his dad. Hearing what Tyrion says in this scene, I am not at all surprised that so many Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones fans defend slavery. After all, the officially approved adaptation of A Song of Ice and Fire explicitly says that killing slavers and ending slavery is wrong and will lead to you becoming the worst villain in the universe. The officially approved adaptation of A Song of Ice and Fire says that trying to end slavery in a violent way, that is the only way that is sure to bring lasting results, something with which even the author of this novel seems to agree with, is equivalent to Nazism. The showrunners believe that Tyrion's plan to end slavery peacefully, with a 9-year transition period, which by history itself was shown to not work, would be preferable to ending slavery with fire and blood. Or better yet, it's best to not do anything about slavery or other oppressive systems. It's better to let evil people live and not change anything around yourself, because you're destined to succumb to madness if you do. If you believe you're doing something right by trying to change the world, sooner or later you will slaughter thousands of innocent people. Killing evil people is madness foreshadowing. Embrace indifference. Uphold the status quo. Let the wheel spin. Feels like a good moment to remind everyone that the showrunners D&D, 2 white men, wanted to create a show where the Confederacy won. Now let us move on to another point that Tyrion is bringing up. The Dothraki cults she burned alive, they would have done worse to her. So remember how in the previous part I mentioned that the madness foreshadowing in the case of Dany often has certain disturbing implications. This is perhaps the most emblematic instance of it all, even above the Viserys thing. I don't know if this is malice on behalf of D&D, or they just didn't realize what they're saying. Given the amount of graphic and unnecessary sexual violence they were insistent on including in the story, I seriously believe that they wrote this on purpose. Think of what Tyrion is saying here. Daenerys burned out the city because she burned alive the cults in Weiss the Track. Let's remind ourselves how exactly this scene plays out.
Goshar, Fostos Halin Hayeran, Hareka Nasi Kisha Ahileki, Majin Kisha, Vazach Tothrakayun, Asher Gilova Hebecha, Hatithir Harshef Kishi, Shei Kekyo Fi, Asher Gilikath, Hasilakira.
Ieri você aqui? Ieri vadrivoi.
These calls said outright, We will gang rape you, and then let our horses gang rape whatever remains of you. These particular words even mirror what Viserys tells Daenerys when he sells her in season 1. I would let all of the Khalasar fuck you and their horses too. So Daenerys was wrong to set the place ablaze to kill the men who want to gang rape her. In that case, what else was she supposed to do? Hope that they won't do it and that it's just an empty threat. Hope that the Doshkalin and the Dothraki presented via Zothrak will intervene. Hope to be able to run away from men who are bigger and faster than her. Hope that Jorah and Daario can defend her against all of the Dothraki Khals, who are leaders of their Khalasars because they're the most skilled warriors. What else was she supposed to do? The implication from these words is that Daenerys should have let herself be gang raped. If she did not want to have madness foreshadowing allegations on her, she shouldn't have killed the men who threatened to gang rape her. She should have let them have their way. This is what Tyrion, or rather the showrunners, mean. A woman threatened with unspeakable sexual violence, who reacts to that violence with killing those who threatened her, is mad. It's already established that Daenerys is subjected to an insane double standard, and this double standard assumes the necessity of her to basically be a saint who knows Geneva Conventions by heart, else she's mad and evil. The same is not expected of any other character, nor any female survivor of sexual violence. Sansa, for instance, is allowed to feed her abusive rapist husband to his dogs, and nobody says that she's mad or evil for it. Daenerys, however, is not allowed to resist being re-victimized and re-traumatized via gang rape that would be so brutal that it would kill her. She is not allowed to kill the people who threaten her, because that's madness foreshadowing. Because there is a continuity between the innocent peasants of King's Landing and these Khals. Since D&D love to include graphic rape scenes in their story, I think I can safely put forward a thesis that the reason why they used this particular instance as madness foreshadowing was because they made Dany too powerful to be gang raped by these Dothraki and their horses. They resented that she cannot be subjected to this atrocity. Hence, they decided to punish her for it in season 8. A side note I will have to this is that I think it's funny that Doshkalin, the previous Dothraki Khaleesi's, I consider to be Dothraki's highest authority, only for the Khals to be the ones to decide whether Dany is allowed to join in the first place. Showrunners and the characters had a limited time to point out all the evidence towards Dany's madness foreshadowing. The fans do not have limits and they can vivisect Dany's entire show storyline in search for clues, hence the list of her foreshadowing crimes grows every day. Fans necessarily take the same mindset as D&D. Why does that mindset even exist though? I already spoke on this channel that the reason for the double standard to Daenerys and only Daenerys is that there exist assumptions about her character that are not necessarily founded on reality. Sure, Daenerys was assumed to be mad, evil and a tyrant even before she reasonably did anything to earn these assumptions. It could not be because she used violence, because all other characters, even noble ones, did so as well. Yet her use of violence was singled out as uniquely bad nonetheless. The same is true for Book Daenerys, who thus far did practically nothing to earn this assumption, since not only is she far less violent and ruthless than her show counterpart, but is also openly concerned with the collateral victims. Yet that presumption persists. When Book Daenerys' crimes are discussed, you often hear people speak in the future tense or in conditional clauses, a grammatical concept I haven't fully grasped in spite of having a BA in English. The book version of the story ended with Daenerys stranded on the Dothraki Sea with Drogon, so she has not yet even reached Westeros. Hence her Mad Queen turn is not yet set in stone in the books, and there is a lot to indicate that this was not George R.R. Martin's idea. But it is considered something inevitable anyway, spoken about with a lot of certainty. Daenerys will burn King's Landing, Daenerys will become a tyrant, Daenerys will, Daenerys would, Daenerys could. It seems like the trajectory of her character is some sort of a vicious cycle, a self-fulfilling prophecy. I assume Daenerys to be mad, I scramble for proof, I find proof, based on this proof, I assume Daenerys to be mad. But if one has a preconceived notion about a character, for instance that the character is secretly evil, then everything that character does will be considered sus. If I assumed Jon Snow to be the Mad King in the making, then every act of violence he engaged in, no matter if justified or not, would be suspicious and would further my theory. Even the good things he did could be used for that purpose, after they were twisted and misinterpreted. This is what we call confirmation bias and cherry picking. Confirmation bias is people's tendency to process information by looking for or interpreting information that is consistent with their existing beliefs. This biased approach to decision making is largely unintentional, and it results in a person ignoring information that is inconsistent with their beliefs. Cherry picking, on the other hand, is defined as biased selection of data to support preconceived ideas. Mad Queen Dany development, or more broadly, theories of her succumbing to madness and being the final villain of the story, have cherry picking and confirmation bias at their very core. If you assume Daenerys to be mad and evil, then everything she does will seem mad and evil to you. Even if you see her doing something good, your confirmation bias will interpret this as her doing something bad. Thus, her killing people who profited off of rape, torture and mutilation of innocent children, that's actually bad, and foreshadowing of her slaughtering thousands of innocent people in King's Landing. You will also only pick what fits your narrative. If your narrative is Dany is mad and evil, you will only pick those cherries that fit this narrative, and not the ones that contradict it. Academics created the scientific method precisely to root out the possibility of falling for these fallacies, especially cherry picking. The scientific method can be easily applied to analyzing books. You position a question or have a certain observation, read the story and form your hypothesis. So the question you ask is Daenerys Targaryen mad? You read the story with the question, not the answer. You take everything into account, and not just the cherries that look especially tasty. Even if you pick a cherry that could fit the yes answer, like her killing the slavers in Astapor, you also have to pick the cherry that has her lock her dragons after one killed a child. You also have to pick the cherry of her resolutely choosing to not be like her dad several times. You have to pick the cherry of her saying that she does not want to hurt innocent people. You have to pick the cherry of her offering enormous sacrifices to save the world. Mad Queen Dany and the plethora of other theories reverse this basic concept. They first put forward a hypothesis, Dany is mad, and then scramble to find justification, or the nebulous foreshadowing. This is what the showrunners did. In season 8, they said a hypothesis, Dany is mad, and scrambled to find any justification from her previous behavior. This is not foreshadowing, because foreshadowing is intentional. This is a fallacy. This is a retcon. Not only is Daenerys exclusively judged for her use of violence, a lot of the things she does need to be taken out of context to make it worse and to fit that agenda. She witnessed slave masters nailing disemboweled children to crosses and then retaliated by killing the exact same number, 163, of the slave masters directly representative of the state that carried out this atrocity, becomes she crucified hundreds of people. She was threatened with gang rape and defended herself with fire because she had no other weapon on her, becomes she burned the Khals alive. Her lifelong abusive brother barged into Dothraki's sacred temple with a sword, signing a death warrant on himself, and threatened to cut a baby out of her belly, and she dissociated as her husband killed him, becomes she had a cold reaction to the death of her enemy. If these situations were all self-evident of Dany's madness in the making, they wouldn't have to be twisted to make it seem like they're worse than they actually are, and taken out of context. If these situations were all self-evident of Dany's madness, she wouldn't be the only one considered a villainous, evil tyrant for the things she does, while other characters can do the same if not worse and be exonerated. If they were self-evident, they would be foreshadowing. But because of all the holes, they are retcons. They are retcons precisely because there are too many holes in it for it to be a genuine conscious development. These are retcons of the worst variety, the laziest and sloppiest ones. The reason why these assumptions about Daenerys even exist are complex. Chief among them is Daenerys' womanhood, from which basically all other problems arise. Being a medieval fantasy, A Song of Ice and Fire attracts all sorts of reactionaries, particularly misogynists and outright violent incels, Hence the progressive messages of this story are ignored by all but a few woke scolds such as myself. Daenerys is a gendered subversion. When we start this story, she is nothing but a bargaining chip of her brother, a cattle to be bought and sold for the fulfillment of man's ambition. In a more conventional story, her arc would be about Viserys or her son, with her serving the role of a disposable woman who dies in childbirth. But instead her brother dies, her son dies, her husband dies, and all of a sudden she wakes dragons from stone and decisively asserts herself as the main character. This is her story. And this is the kind of story that would normally be reserved for a man, an exiled monarch, getting dragons, amassing an army, and coming home to reclaim what's his. This isn't just my subjective reading of the story, reiterated by George R.R. Martin, the author of the books himself, several times. Why is Dany a princess and not a prince? I made this choice a long time ago, but I think I wanted to play a little with gender roles and reverse things a little. And of course, Mother of Dragons, to my mind, is much better than Father of Dragons. There is the connection between the woman who rings for life, carrying a huge power of death, fire and destruction. There are very powerful metaphors in there. How did you construct the character of Daenerys? I started with the concept of having the exiled former kings, who had been driven some time away across the water, trying to regain their throne. And right from the first I found Dany more interesting than Viserys. So I wanted to play with that and also show a frightened girl becoming a powerful woman, coming into her own power and slowly realizing that. A Song of Ice and Fire was never about straightforward fantasy heroes. In these books, rather than gallant knights and wise kings, the heroes are a former bridal slave, a disabled orphan boy, a dwarf, a traumatized gender non-conforming girl, and an illegitimate son. You can guess which one of them is believed by the fanbase to be the hero, with the illegitimacy part often being questioned anyway. Daenerys has a role that they believe is a man's birthright. She has dragons, armies, military power, and for a long time, a sole claim to her ancestral seat. She is basically unstoppable. As such, people revile and despise her and want her punished, because she is out of her role as a woman, a dutiful wife ready to die for a man's character development, a wise mother, or an evil mad queen, always, no matter what, subservient to a man and his storyline. Even if she executes power in her own right as an evil queen, she is nothing but an adversary for him, rather than her own person. Hence the incels desperately want to force her back into a feminine archetype, and they most often choose an evil bitch queen in need to be put down by a noble, righteous, self-insert man. This is the basis for most of the Mad Queen theories. This is true both for the show fans and book fans, though some book fans, who are more aware of the optics, decide for a more generous variant of Dany reduced to a disposable, heroic sacrificial lamb. But it still reinforces the same idea, that Daenerys, a gendered subversion, cannot remain that gendered subversion and must necessarily be put back into a typically feminine role sooner or later. The big twist of the story was that A Song of Ice and Fire, a subversive story of non-conventional heroes, was actually a conventional story of conventional heroes. I believe that it's not a coincidence that the showrunners decided to play into the expectation of misogynists. It's because they themselves were misogynists. The show was never free from misogyny, nor are the books for that matter, but season 8 of Game of Thrones just overflows with misogyny. Misogyny was the vindication of the thesis that cocks are important. Jon is better because Lords of Westeros would sooner accept a man. He is a measured and tempered man against a hysterical, evil, unstable bitch. Misogyny was reducing Cersei and Daenerys to two tyrannical queens, and then have one commit a big atrocity while the other is rendered into a crying baby. Misogyny was having Sansa thank her abusers and a rapist for making her a stronger person, and linking her success in seizing the throne to enduring gendered violence with grace. Misogyny was Daenerys, who was never defined by her romantic relationships, losing it in large part because Jon wouldn't kiss her back. Misogyny was men getting along well, whereas all women were being endlessly catty with one another. Misogyny was the insinuation that Daenerys should have let herself be gang raped instead of killing the cause. It's almost as if the showrunners googled sexist tropes and ran a checklist to include them all. But the worst thing about it is that they didn't do it. They simply, reflexively, fell on narrative sexism and never even realized it. The circle of writers for Game of Thrones was becoming smaller and smaller each season until it was just 3 men. Women were barely included in the writing room until they disappeared completely. The showrunners who prided themselves in surprises and subverting tropes made their final twist be about an iconic character who inspired countless copycats, who paved the way for women in fantasy to be reduced into yet another classic fantasy archetype of evil women and good men. And the audience clapped. The audience were the ones who inserted this idea into their minds in the first place. It's the audience who, since 1993, wanted to see it happen. They wanted the girl they met when she was 13 and sold into bridal slavery, almost raped to death, overcoming the violence done to her, to leave the world as an insane tyrant put down by male violence. They wanted this to happen to 16-year-old show Daenerys and got what they wanted, and they wanted to happen to book Daenerys as well. However much faith I have in George R. R. Martin, the man who wrote the lament of "No one ever looked for a girl, it was a prince that was promised, not a princess," to not fall into this trap himself, I still cannot fully trust him either. I have already said that I believe that D&D aided themselves with fan theories to write the story, and that the idea to make Daenerys into a Mad Queen was something they took from the audience, who wanted to see Daenerys brutalized via male violence, having gone mad ever since they saw her no longer brutalized by her husband and brother, out of her role as a woman. Some of this justification for Dany's turn that we discussed already, Viserys, Astapor, Meereen, Dikaz et al., were first put forward by the audience, but there are far more of Dany's crimes pointed out by the audience that largely follow the same pattern. Let's reiterate it again. Because she is already assumed to be a foregone conclusion and destined to be a Mad Queen, based on the wish to reverse her gendered subversion, confirmation bias will cause people to use any act of violence, any morally grey or even wrong action, often even acts of good that are twisted to make her villainous, no matter the context, no matter the reasoning, no matter if it's a necessary move or not, as fuel for that theory, while never once offering that sort of scrutiny for anyone else. And often with the sole alternative being Daenerys letting herself be killed, raped, abused, violated, condemned for death. Here is an incomplete list of actions Dany took over the course of the series that I have seen being used as fuel for the Mad Queen agenda, widely considered foreshadowing. Burning Mirri Maz Duur in Season 1. After Viserys is killed, Dany tries to convince Drogo to cross the sea. He only relents after a Westerosi man tries to poison her and his unborn son. Because of the way Dothraki operate, in order to get ships, Drogo raids a Lazaran village to get slaves he can exchange. Dany is horrified by the rape and slaughter that she witnesses and decides to extend her protection over the women. Drogo gets a mild injury and one of the women, Mirri Maz Duur, offers to heal him. Drogo's wound gets worse, and in order to save him from death, Daenerys asks Mirri Maz Duur to perform a ritual that would save him. Mirri Maz Duur agrees and says that nobody must enter the tent when she performs her magic. When Drogo's Blood Riders try to do that, a violent clash erupts. Dany goes into labor and Jorah enters the tent, so that Mirri can help with delivering the baby. When Dany wakes up, Drogo is alive but comatose, and she learns that her baby was stillborn and deformed. Mirri admits to having used her son's life in exchange for Drogo, and did so deliberately, as revenge for the slaughter of her village. Since the Dothraki burned their dead, Dany constructs a funeral pyre and puts her dragon eggs there. She orders Mirri to be tied to the pyre as well. When Mirri boasts that she's not going to scream, Dany responds, "You will. But it's not your screams that I want, only your life." The pyre is lit. Dany walks into it and emerges with 3 living dragons. I know that this video is supposed to be about the show, but in this instance I need to bring up the books. D&D were known for removing magical elements from the show, and one of those was the removal of dragon dreams that Dany had before she pieced the clues to wake dragons from stone. A lot of fans don't realize this when they read the books either, that everything was deliberate, and Dany wasn't just doing whatever, and I think it may be in part due to the residue of the show, where we are not shown Dany's dreams and a very important line is cut. In the books, the exchange between Mirri and Dany is longer and gives a crucial additional component. Mirri says that she will not scream, to which Dany says she will, and adds, "But it's not your scream that I want, only your life. I remember what you told me. Only death can pay for life." Miri is undoubtedly burned partially as revenge, but also as a necessary component of the ritual to wake dragons from stone. In this show, this is far more ambiguous, and the line, "It's not your screams I want, only your life," without the addition of "I remember what you told me, only death can pay for life," makes this scene far more ambiguous. Why does she want her life? Because she wants her to die for what she did to her, Drogo and her child? Or because life is also a necessary component of the ritual? It's hard to say. Someone who hasn't read the books will probably see this solely as revenge. Often, in order to make this scene worse than it actually is, it's also framed as Dany burned her slave alive, or even Dany burned her slave alive for something she might not have even do. Even though no question is ever placed on Miri's blame in killing an innocent child and rendering his mother infertile, she admits to it and basically boasts about it. Miri's revenge is framed as justified, even though she caused infinitely more harm to two people who did not do anything to her, Daenerys and Rhaego. Dany's revenge on Miri, however, is not justified. In the audience's eyes, a 17-year-old should have the maturity of an adult woman and understand where 40-something Miri is coming from right after she killed her only protector, her innocent baby, caused her a painful stillbirth, and also made her infertile. She should forgive her for killing her baby because, in Miri's perspective, she was justified and had a right to revenge. She should have let herself be violated with no questioning. It's the same exact pattern as with the Khals and Viserys. Daenerys having any response towards the violation of her body or the prospect of thereof, other than forgiveness, understanding, and readiness to take it upon herself without complaining, is pathologized. Wrong. Foreshadowing of madness. Everyone is allowed revenge. Miri is allowed revenge on Drogo, Daenerys and Rhaego, for the destruction of her village. Arya is allowed revenge on all the male members of House Frey. Sansa is allowed revenge on her abusive rapist husband. Jon Snow is allowed revenge on the people who staged a mutiny against him. Tyrion is allowed revenge on his abusive father. Cersei is allowed revenge on the Fae. Cersei is allowed revenge on Ellaria. Sandor is allowed revenge on his brother. Sansa and Arya are allowed revenge on Littlefinger. Arya is allowed revenge on Meryn Trant. Brienne is allowed revenge on Stannis. In at least one instance, the people that these characters take the revenge on also had a point. All this entire family was slaughtered by the wildlings that Jon was letting south of the wall. Ollie is reviled, and his reasoning and motivations do not matter to anyone. Miri is considered a stone-cold badass, performatively stand, believed to have a point, her perspective understood. Jon protected Ollie and was punished for it. Dany protected Miri and was punished for it. Both of them violated Jon's and Daenerys' bodies. Jon is allowed to take revenge. Daenerys isn't. Miri is liked and appreciated. Ollie is despised. Out of all the characters in the series, only Daenerys is not allowed revenge. Only Daenerys is not allowed to have normal, human responses, such as anger, grief, and a wish to punish someone who subjected her and her baby to grievous harm. Only Daenerys should be above it. Only Daenerys should let herself be killed, raped, and violated. Double standard? Yes. Retcon? Absolutely. Foreshadowing? Absolutely not. Threatening to burn Carve if she isn't allowed in Season 2.
I thought we were welcome.
If you heard a Dothraki horde was approaching your city, you might do the same, Khaleesi.
Horde?
My name is
Daenerys
Daenerys.
Stormborn of the House Targaryen.
You know me, my lord?
Only by reputation, Khaleesi, and I'm no lord, merely a humble merchant. They call you the Mother of Dragons.
And what should I call you?
Oh, my name is quite long and quite impossible for foreigners to pronounce. I am simply a trader of spices. But we are the 13, charged with the governance and protection of Karth, the greatest city that ever was or will be.
The beauty of Qarth is legendary. Qarth.
Might we see the dragons?
My friend, we have traveled very far. We have no food, no water. Once I see my people fed, I would be honored.
Forgive me, Mother of Dragons, but no man alive has seen a living dragon. Some of my more skeptical friends refuse to believe your children even exist. All we ask is the chance to see for ourselves.
I am not a liar.
Oh, I don't think you are. But as I've never met you before, my opinion on the matter is of limited value.
Where I come from, guests are treated with respect, not insulted at the gates.
Then perhaps you should return to where you come from. We wish you well.
What are you doing? You promised to receive me.
We have received you. Here we are, and here you are.
If you do not let us in, all of us will die.
Which we shall deeply regret. But Karth did not become the greatest city that ever was or will be by letting Dothraki savages through its gates.
Khaleesi, please be careful.
13! When my dragons are grown, we will take back what was stolen from me and destroy those who have wronged me. We will lay waste to armies and burn cities to the ground. Turn us away, and we will burn you first.
Ah, you are a true Targaryen. Only, as you said a moment ago, if we don't let you into the city, you will all die. And so...
Retreating in fear from a little girl is unbecoming of the greatest city that ever was or will be.
The discussion is over, Zaro, Zoan, Doxos. The 13 have spoken.
I am one of the 13, and I am still speaking.
The girl threatens to burn our city to the ground, and you would invite her in for a cup of wine?
She is the mother of dragons. Do you expect her to watch her people starve without breathing fire? I believe we can allow a few Dothraki through our gates without dooming our city. After all, here I am, a savage from the Summer Isles, and Karth still stands.
Our decision is final.
Very well. I invoke Sumai. I will vouch for her, her people, and her dragons, in accordance with the law.
Be it on your head.
Welcome to Karth, my lady.
I cannot help but bring up how the scene of Dany in front of the gates of Karth was altered from the books. In the books, Dany is invited to Karth by 3 separate people. In the show, she has to beg to be let in. She has crossed the desert and she, her people, and her dragons will die if she's not allowed in. If pleading does not work, what else is she supposed to do? Say, okay, we'll go back to the desert, sorry for bothering you. Starving, dehydrated, in need to protect vulnerable people, she resorts to the last thing she has, threats. And even the showrunners agree. Daenerys, her clothes in tatters, stood at the towering gates of Karth. The mother of dragons had survived a long trek through the expanse of the Red Waste, seeking shelter for the weary remains of her Khalasar. But the city's pampered leaders refused to let her inside. Emilia Clarke's stance was firm and defiant, her voice resounding across the desert. When my dragons are grown, we will take back what was stolen from me and destroy those who wronged me. We will lay waste to armies and burn cities to the ground. Turn us away, and we will burn you first. Showrunner Dan Weiss watched Clarke on a nearby monitor and marveled at the way she channeled the power of a fearsome Dothraki leader. She looks really tough, Weiss said of the petite 5'2" actress. I'm a 6' tall male, and if I try to stand tough, I look like an asshole. We really need to sell that if she doesn't get into the city, she's truly fucked. And see, this once again. She should give up. She should say, okay, let me take my people back to the desert. Let me die of hunger and dehydration so that I don't have Mad Queen allegations on me. The alternative to the Carthian merchants not letting them inside the city is to give up, see her people die, and then die herself. She has to resort to everything in this moment, and threats are the last thing that may get her and her people inside the city. But choosing to frame this scene as Mad Queen foreshadowing serves to reinforce one thing only. She and her people should die instead. Burning Deacon and Randyll Tarly in Season 7. As I said previously, Season 7 is when I believe they began in earnest writing towards the Mad Queen plot development. Only then the framing agreed that she is in the wrong. Do you know what did not agree that she is in the wrong? The fact that she gave them choices. If I were in charge of writing the Mad Queen development, I would have Daenerys take all these people as prisoners of war. If Randyll and Deacon refuse, I make her kill them. Daenerys does not do that. She says that if all these people pledged their allegiance to her, they can return home. No questions asked. Randyll and Deacon refuse because they already have a queen. Daenerys says, not a problem for me. The Night's Watch is an alternative. They both refuse. What else is she supposed to do at this point? Say, alright, fine, go in grace. Any leader in the position that Daenerys is in would have to take action to not have their authority undermined. Most would choose execution. I know for sure that Jon Snow would, because he executed someone for less, and he was never framed as unhinged or tyrannical, but as badass. The execution of the Tarlys and Janos Slynt are the same exact situations. Only Daenerys shows more mercy and offers more choices than Jon, yet she is singled out as a Mad Queen anyway. If these morons were unable to write convincing foreshadowing, where they were already sure of the Mad Queen turn, then how in the goddamn hell were they supposed to write convincing foreshadowing when they were definitely not yet sure of Daenerys' trajectory? Explain to me like I'm 5, please. A common and strange pattern in this story and overall the way Dany is treated by fans is that before she even does anything wrong, she is already treated with hostility and suspicion. This becomes the most apparent in Season 8, but was a consistent pattern in how she was talked about by the audience. At the beginning of Season 8, Daenerys holds her conquest and takes all of her forces and 2 dragons north to defend Winterfell against the existential threat. She is met with hostility and mistrust both from the common people and from the nobility. This can of course be explained by the North's cultural xenophobia, and prejudice is fine apparently, but let's just accept this explanation. Sansa and Dany have some catfights, but then Dany tries to make amends with her and Sansa explains that she worries whether Dany has some ulterior motive in helping the North. That's a lot of mistrust, but it's still within the realm of reasonability. Do you know what isn't reasonable? That everyone holds onto this mindset after the battle is already over.
I mean that I want to kneel to someone.
I swore myself and the North to her cause.
I respect that.
You respect it?
We needed her. We needed her army. Her dragons. You did the right thing. And we're doing the right thing telling you we don't trust your queen.
You don't know her yet.
I'll never know her. She's not one of us.
The Northmen, Sansa and Arya, still treat her with hostility and suspicion. Daenerys did everything to prove that she did not have any ulterior motives. Half of her armies were decimated. A man who's been following her for years died for her. She risked her life in battle herself, only to still be treated with suspicion, for no reason at all. Or rather, there is a reason, but it goes against basic storytelling principles. You see, when you write, you need to consider the shocking concept that the characters are limited to their own perception and usually cannot see the future. They physically cannot know what Dany is going to do in the next 2 episodes. They did not witness any of the grand foreshadowing because it happened on another continent. The sole thing they witnessed themselves was Daenerys arriving at Winterfell to defend their very home and making an enormous sacrifice for them. They don't have to like her, but they have no reason to be suspicious of her. Frankly, they should be grateful, because if it wasn't for them and their stupid plan to have the Dothraki charge and be slaughtered, they would all be zombies in the Night King's army. I know that people don't want Daenerys to be acknowledged in any way. I know people don't consider her actions as heroic, no matter how many of those heroic deeds she is doing. I know that no matter how selfless and sacrificial her actions are, they are never going to be enough. But the objective reality is that She proved herself worthy of being followed, fulfilled her duty to the people, and it should be acknowledged. They objectively have no reason to mistrust her at this point of the story. The reason why they mistrust her is because they have the foreknowledge of what is going to happen in the next episode. Knowledge that they physically cannot have. The only character that can have that knowledge is Bran, who can see into the future. But there is no scene of Bran gathering his siblings and telling them what he saw in a vision and that Daenerys is dangerous. There's not even a deleted scene or anything. Everyone knows because they know. That knowledge is inserted there by the writers. Somehow everyone is mistrustful of Daenerys, and of course, they will be vindicated and super smart for seeing Daenerys for what she truly is, but they logically do not have the necessary information to form this conclusion. From their point of view, Daenerys did not do anything, and they have no way of knowing what will happen outside of a gut feeling. Out of context of episode 5 and 6, this is absurd. This is not even a rookie mistake in writing. A creative writing course attendee who never wrote anything outside of a grocery store list would know not to make such a mistake. And you know what's the funniest thing about it? They did it twice. And the second time it made even less sense. Varys is all over the place as a character. At first he served Robert, being one of the people who backed Dany's assassination in season 1. Then he was loyal to the Lannister regime. Then he changes allegiances to Daenerys. From season 5 to 7, Varys serves Dany, though they do not have a single conversation until season 7. Dany is willing to forgive him for taking part in the assassination back in season 1, but gives a warning that is clearly reasonable to someone who is so sketchy. Do it again, and I will kill you. What does he do? He changes allegiances when there's a man with cock and balls on the horizon. The moment Varys learns of Jon's parentage, he urges him to press his claim, even though Jon is insistent on not wanting it. Again, this is something you are allowed to do. You can abdicate. He can still marry Daenerys, or rather could, if he was Jon Snow from the previous seasons, who should not feel icky about aunt-nephew incest, because the world that he lives in does not see this as incest, nor does it see it as icky. There was an uncle-niece marriage in the Stark family in the 2nd century after the conquest, so not that far back. Varys' reason on why he decided to change allegiances is because cocks are important. This is D&D's expectations subverting. Jon good because man. Varys not only wants to defect to Jon, but also he plans to assassinate Daenerys to clear his path. So not only he betrayed her like he pinky promised he never would, he tries to kill her. So in that case, what is Daenerys supposed to do? Forgive Varys once more for trying to betray her and kill her? Allow him to go to Jon Snow, which would threaten her life and well-being, and kiss him goodbye? Or maybe she should simply let herself be killed? What would any character do in Dany's spot if they learned they were being betrayed and the betrayer tried to kill them? Would they be expected to let it slide? Last time I checked, Jon Snow executed a man not for betrayal, but for refusal to follow an order. Did anybody treat him with worry and suspicion afterwards? No, because he is not expected to be so endlessly forgiving that he has to let himself be killed to not have Mad King allegations on himself. When Varys is about to be executed, of course this is framed as Dany being the Mad King reborn, and unjustly executing an innocent man. Varys even says, "I hope I'm wrong about you." So get this, Varys witnesses Dany grieving the losses she suffered in a very short span of time, and believes that this makes her a Mad Queen. Her normal human emotions are pathologized by him, and he believes that her being sad and upset means she's crazy. He tries to assassinate her to clean Jon's path, and he still believes her to be the Mad Queen when she wants to execute him for it. And when she does kill him, as with any other character in the story, he is still framed as a victim, because he has the knowledge he physically cannot have. Of course, the Northmen and Varys are vindicated in retrospect, but that's still terrible writing. Then he gave them no indication that there's something wrong with her, unless you think that being sad over the death of your friends and a child means something is wrong with you. Even if you still believe in foreshadowing, they did not see most of it. Again, they as characters do not have the same knowledge as we do. Why do I bring all of this up? Because the way they treat Daenerys is such a microcosm for this entire foreshadowing insanity that it would be incredible meta-commentary if it wasn't all in earnest. Before Daenerys does anything that could reasonably frame her as a Mad Queen, and after she does everything to prove that she is not evil, by, for example, sacrificing her armies in defense of humanity, She is still treated with suspicion and hostility. When she frees slaves, chains her dragon so that they don't kill children, sacrifices her dragon to save Jon Snow and his stupid team, suspends her conquest to save the world, saves the world, she is still treated with suspicion and hostility. The showrunners vindicated the very confirmation bias that I spoke of. It's all a vicious circle. I assume Daenerys to be mad. I search for clues to fit it. I only pick the cherries that support my narrative, applying double standards and selective morality. I assume Daenerys to be mad. It's a mindset they took from their own audience. In A Storm of Swords, Barristan Selmy tells Daenerys that her grandfather, Jaehaerys II, once said that madness and greatness are two sides of the same coin, and that when a Targaryen is born, gods toss a coin, and the world holds its breath to see how it will land. This quote, like many others, is thrown at people in place of any genuine analysis, just like a dragon is not a slave, fire cannot kill a dragon, or if you think this has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention. This quote does not have a basis in reality. First, most Targaryens were neither great nor mad, they were simply normal people. Some of them might have become depressed or emotionally unstable due to their life experiences, but the one unambiguously mentally ill Targaryen was Aerys. Maybe Aerion if we squint. The rest are even more vague, such as Maegor. Did he have a mental illness, or was he simply ruthless and cruel? Cruelty and sadistic tendencies are not synonymous with mental illness. Cruelty can be a symptom of some mental illnesses, but the vast majority of mentally ill people are not evil and sadistic. Actually, mentally ill people are more likely to be on the receiving end of abuse. Nonetheless, this quote was no doubt used to create a lazy foil dynamic between Daenerys and Jon. For Jon, he was given the suspension of disbelief on the basis of his Targaryen heritage, while Daenerys wasn't. Daenerys was used as a convenient scapegoat for all the wars about the Targaryens, while Jon's Targaryen heritage was used solely to his advantage, for getting a dragon as easily as one might rent a car, for having a claim to the throne, special parents, no longer being a bastard. Jon would never be accused of having Targaryen madness. Jon is never expected to bear the brunt of the anti-Targaryen stigma. Jon is never expected to be evil or a villain. Jon is endlessly babied, justified, always framed as noble and honorable. Even when he kills his cartoonishly evil enemies ruthlessly. But when Daenerys kills her cartoonishly evil enemies ruthlessly, it's concerning. She's mad. Her draconic power is dangerous. She's a tyrant. What even is Targaryen madness? Is it something that is genetic? If so, Jon Snow should also be treated with caution. He is a grandson of a madman and a son of what many believe is another one. One of the things that always made me laugh was people's vicious hatred of Rhaegar, how he kidnapped a teenager for her magical womb, while they also want Rhaegar of their perception to be vindicated. For Jon to truly be special because two special people had sex, and for Rhaegar's prophecy obsession to be vindicated. I can guarantee you that if it was Dany who was born from the union of Rhaegar and Lyanna, this would be used as proof of her being destined to succumb to Targaryen madness, just like Rhaegar. And we would also probably hear that having special parentage is not enough to be a hero. What is Targaryen madness then? Nothing. It's a buzzword. It's another thing in a long string of things that is used to further only one agenda, for Daenerys to become a mad queen. If Targaryen madness was a thing people consider in earnest, they would apply it to other Targaryens or alleged Targaryens, not just Daenerys. They would accept that Jon Snow having blackout rages, or young Griff getting angry at losing a board game as warning signs. If Daenerys attacked someone for a slight or knocked over a board after losing a game, this would be madness foreshadowing. Ironically, the Targaryen madness also works as confirmation bias in the case of past Targaryens. If you assume that Targaryen madness is in any way viable, suddenly every Targaryen who did something ruthless or bad can become mad. All characters in this story were to some degree butchered in Season 8. But the thing about them is that, while they became shells of their former selves, and their past characterization was often ruined, everyone got what they wanted. Sansa became queen, Jon went beyond the wall to have adventures, Arya decided to be a sailor, Bran became king, Tyrion became his hand and will probably inherit Casterly Rock. Even minor characters were rewarded, like Gendry with Storm's End and Bronn with Highgarden. One of the things I never understood is how some people, including the members of the cast, tried to defend the ending like, You expected a sweet and happy ending for your face but didn't get it, that's why you're salty. But the thing is, objectively, all characters got their sweet happy endings. All but Daenerys Targaryen, who not only did not get a single thing she wanted, but the conclusion to her arc was violent, misogynistic, and downright humiliating. Mad Queen Dany that the showrunners played into was never something that logically follows from her arc. It arose out of misogynistic, psychosexual hatred and a wish to punish her for straying from her role as a woman in the most violent, misogynistic, and humiliating way possible. That's why the only woman who got to stay in power in the very end was the one who thanked her abusers, and not the one who said that she rose above the violence done to her and believed in herself all along. Daenerys was the final villain of the series. Someone who had a higher kill count than Tywin, Cersei, Ramsay, basically every villain in the story combined. She was punished with becoming a villain for trying to do what is right. Every single one of her darker moments was almost immediately undercut with her doing something good, just and heroic, but none of it could ever absolve her. Sacrificing half of her armies to defend the world could not absolve her. Her rushing to save Jon Snow and losing a dragon in the process could not absolve her. Hell, her ending slavery was wrong all along, as it turns out, so she could not be absolved. In retrospect, she was the worst villain of them all, in conjunction with being the only villain that, in the process, was probably doing the most heroic and selfless things out of the entire cast. The moral of Game of Thrones was, never change anything. Never try to do anything good. Your path is always predestined, no matter how much good you do. If you're a woman, you're biologically destined to succumb into female hysteria in your genes. If you're a woman, you're biologically destined to succumb into female hysteria if you seize power. Cocks are important, and they save you from the mad genes somehow, even if all the mad members of your family were men. While Daenerys displayed ruthlessness, she only became paranoid in the last episodes of the last season, and for good reason, because her advisors were actively trying to poison her. Daenerys before is shown to be quite down to earth, often listening to her advisors, questioning her own actions, something mentally ill and megalomaniac people wouldn't do. That did not absolve her. Daenerys is seen directly admitting that her father was an evil person on 2 separate occasions, and even apologizes to Jon Snow, whose grandfather was killed by him. She actively makes efforts to right the wrongs and not be like him. That did not absolve her. This is precisely why the discourse around Daenerys Targaryen is so frustrating. She is hardly the only character in Game of Thrones that resorts to violence, hardly the only one who makes questionable choices, and hardly the only one who is ruthless, but she is the only one to consistently get punished for it. Because people had the preconceived notion that she is mad, everything she does is suspect, and as such, she is expected to abide by a completely different set of rules. Rules that she physically cannot follow because the world that she lives in prevents it. All theories for Dany's ending, including the development we've seen in the show, follow the same pattern. She is punished for things that are not her fault. She is punished for having a certain father. She is punished for belonging to a certain family. She is punished for the wildfire someone else set beneath King's Landing, and for the oversight of others who did not remove it. After that punishment, she has to die. Even as a Mad Queen, who intentionally burned the city, she does not get to rule in a tyrannical fashion a la Maegor. Even with armies and dragons, she is swiftly taken down, and all the resources she accumulated either disperse or are conveniently taken away by someone seen as more deserving of them. When she accidentally burns King's Landing due to wildfire, she is forced to pay for the crime of Aerys ordering it to be placed underneath the city, and for Jaime not doing anything to make sure that his order was not carried out. And she is not allowed to live afterwards. Afterwards, her armies and dragons have to be sacrificed. Her body and life also have to be sacrificed. She dies to redeem herself like a good Catholic, or offers her body as a tool for a man to forge a magical sword. Even her die-hard fans expect her to die in one way or another. Daenerys is, currently, the character most likely to win. She has armies and the strongest weapon at her disposal. These armies and dragons have to be utilized in the fight against the others, but Dany herself cannot be rewarded for providing these resources. She is a woman who's not supposed to get what she wants. She is not supposed to be rewarded for being a gendered subversion. She is not supposed to be rewarded at all. For anything. Because the audience hates her. Mad Queen Dany being one of the oldest theories is not proof of its validity. It's proof that the fandom has always wished for her to be killed after undergoing humiliating character assassination. Mad Queen Dany is not a development that logically follows from her arc. It is a misogynistic wish to gaze at the woman, falling for female hysteria, and then being slaughtered by her loved one, either on her own volition as redemption for something that wasn't her fault, or to stop the world from her female hysteria. Showrunners D&D got wrong lessons out of A Song of Ice and Fire. They believe that this story is all about killing random characters and pulling shocking twists out of nowhere. The reality is, most of the deaths in Martin's story are not accidental, and all the twists are carefully foreshadowed. The Red Wedding was foreshadowed in Book 2, when Dany has a vision of a man with a head of a wolf, sitting at the feast, full of slaughtered corpses. D&D could not foreshadow a twist if their life depended on it. All of these shocking events came into fruition the moment they happened, with no setup, no foreshadowing, no clues. They wanted to shock people for the sake of shocking people. Arya killing the Night King was not foreshadowed or set up because they decided on it one last second, since Jon doing it was too obvious. So, why do you all give them so much of the benefit of the doubt? Why do you in earnest believe that anything about Daenerys was foreshadowed by these hacks? These charlatans were known to remove foreshadowing, like they removed a lot of foreshadowing for the Red Wedding, so that it's even more shocking. So, why is "it was totally set up and foreshadowed, it was just executed poorly" such a popular talking point? D&D were, at least initially, following the books. They knew the ending of the story that George shared with them in detail in 2013. So why is their final shocking plot twist that is also totally happening in the books so badly executed and so terribly set up if they had George's writing at their disposal? Why did it require everyone to go stupid? Why did it require everyone to ignore very easy solutions? Why did it require believing that Sansa and Varys both became Green Seers? D&D felt the need to do some final, shocking, nihilistic twist for their final season, because this was all they could do, what they were known for. They could not end the story with humanity winning against the others. That's too predictable and not nihilistic at all. Thus, they decided to sacrifice their most popular character for an expectation-subverting, final shocking twist. You may complain that your favorite character was ruined by the season finale, that Jon only repeated "I don't want it," or that Bran became an emotionless plot device. But not a single character was butchered the way Daenerys Targaryen was butchered. Only Daenerys Targaryen was scapegoated for the use of violence in a show known for its violence. Only Daenerys Targaryen was scapegoated for the use of violence when other characters were allowed to bake people into pies and serve them to their father. Only Daenerys Targaryen was butchered beyond recognition. Only Daenerys was punished for refusing to be raped. Only Daenerys started this story, being non-consensually fondled by her abuser, and ended it with a knife in her breast. Daenerys is the only character not allowed to use violence, no matter if it's for a greater good or not, while everyone else can use violence for whatever end they need, in spite of Dany being the only one of them who does not want to harm innocents in the process. Only Daenerys is judged by modern standards. Daenerys was the only character to be treated as a foregone conclusion from the very beginning, before anything even pointed in that direction, thus creating a weird self-fulfilling prophecy. The universe, the characters, the law, the events of the story had to bend themselves for that turn, rather than coming out of the story organically. Madness foreshadowing moments are actually retcons, because 90% of them were not written with the intention to foreshadow Dany's turn in Season 8. They were retroactively decided to be setups for that shocking twist, to justify bad writing, and require applying a double standard for Daenerys, only condemning her for any violence she committed. Expect her to not have normal human emotions. Expect her to be killed, raped, or violated instead. In short, there was no foreshadowing. People want this ending for Dany, wanted it for Dany in the show and want it in the books. and they don't care how many pretzels there have to be made out of the narrative for it to happen. They don't care about all those double standards, applying modern lenses to Dany, how this does not in any way follow from her story. They don't care about any of it. They crucify D&D for their stupid writing in every other place, but give them the benefit of the doubt that they did set up Dany's shocking twist in Season 8. After it was decisively proved that they're not the type of writers to foreshadow and set up. The showrunners, who could not write a convincing conflict without bending everything to fit it, suddenly had enough skill to spend years setting up this development, only they fumbled the execution. The show proves that this development could never make sense, no matter how brilliantly George would have written it, and yet it's still pushed everywhere and by everyone. Let's be honest with what this is. Mad Queen Dany is wish fulfillment. It's a culmination of all the narrative misogyny in the show. It's a culmination of the resentment men feel when they see a woman take what they see is a man's role and a man's birthright. It's a psychosexual fantasy. It's a wish to reduce Dany's gendered subversion in the most violent and humiliating way possible. This is why nobody has seriously scrutinized the claim it was foreshadowed but executed badly, up until now, 5 years later. This is why we still hear that it was always there. This is why people insist that this is George's ending. But why would George self-admittedly write a story riddled with gendered subversions, if the goal was to once again make Dany an adversary for a secret prince? D&D never foreshadowed anything. You only believe that they did because of your insane own suspension of disbelief, because this is what you wanted all along, and if you want it, your confirmation bias will win, your double standards will win, you will only pick certain cherries, you will praise any retcon as pristine foreshadowing. Thanks for watching! Remember that if you like my content, like, subscribe and share so that more people can see it. Make sure to click the notification button so that you never miss a new video.
Mm-hmm.